Bangalore is a Gadigal word and it means to make or to do. And the mural, essentially, to distill it down, it's an acknowledgement of sorts. You are on Gadigal land. It's really important that people can see Aboriginal culture because it's just been essentially almost completely erased. So it's our responsibility to put this imagery back onto place.
I feel really grounded when I'm drawing ancestors' spirits and the oldest living culture in the world. It's magical to be able to paint in colonial buildings, and on these walls it's decolonising spaces that usually wouldn't have the opportunity to have these stories.
The imagery are taken from rock engravings. There's fish, kangaroos, boomerangs, shields. It's an abstract map of this particular site. When you see the outside mirror and you come in here, there's an obvious link. They're the same rock engravings, but this is a really nice, almost like a little sketch of that. This is a way of us reclaiming that and celebrating it and putting it back into the landscape in a way.
Murals and street art can be seen on social media without it being censored. It's pure and it's what we want to be able to say to connect our dual histories of Australia, informing place and space and an acknowledgement to country, which I think every office and every building should have.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here to have started this with the Gadigal mural. I just want to do a bit of housekeeping before introducing you to Yvonne Weldon, chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. So we do encourage you to use the Zoom chat to talk with each other, to let us know where you are, to let us know what you're thinking, and to share information resources. I'd also like to introduce the timekeeper. We have Dan here. Dan, can you wave? Okay, Dan is going to be timekeeper for the speakers. He's going to have a first bell 30 seconds before people run out of time. Do you want to just share that bell, Dan? Didn't hear it? Did other people hear it? Oh, that's interesting. Might need a bit of work there.
We can do this one. That one. All right, go for it. You're gonna get a bell 30 seconds out.
Oh, there you go.
And then a second bell on the finishing time.
Great. Okay. And if people could mute off if not speaking, please. And now I would like to, with great delight, introduce you to Yvonne Weldon, chairperson of Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who will deliver the Welcome to Country. Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you. Good morning, sisters and brothers. As I said, my name is Yvonne Weldon. I'm a Wiradjuri woman from Cowra here in New South Wales. I'm from the waters of the Clare, also known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee Rivers. I am the elected chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are the cultural authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act for the land that I'm on. I'd like to pay my respects to all elders past and present, and to you and the ancestors' lands that you are all on. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, welcome to Gadigal land. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here today and to deliver that welcome. We've been spending significant time building relationships particularly with David Beaumont, but also now with other Indigenous organisations as part of our work with Sydney Commons Lab. And so we're delighted to have you as part of this event today as well. Thank you. Okay, we're now going to go to a video that's just a brief intro to Sydney Commons Lab and the work that we're doing. thank you for that video. Thank you for everyone in Sydney Commons Lab and to Impact Story Lab who actually put that video together for us. So first of all, I haven't really introduced myself. I'm Tarania Suhood. I'm the founder of In Collaboration, which is a social enterprise. We build relationships and ecosystems for transformational change. And I'm also the convener of Sydney Commons Lab. So I'd also like to acknowledge that we're being supported for this event and in other ways by City of Sydney. It's wonderful to have Deputy Mayor Jess Scully here today, along with Monica Barone, the CEO, and also David Beaumont, the Senior Community Engagement Coordinator from Aboriginal Community Development. This is a wonderful contribution to the day, but also we've been building relationships with each of them over time. You will see today that we see relationships as key to change. Sydney Commons Lab, on that note, is cultivating relationships and sparking collaborations for increasing the capacity, increasing the ability for us to do things together, to progress the commons and in support of communities building wealth. And of course, why is this important ever more now? We're in a space of cascading crises with COVID-19, climate emergency, increasing homelessness, and we need ways of operating to care about each other and our earth. And we need, mainstream, everyone is actually saying we need an economic system that works for all. This is no longer marginal in these conversations. And we need social systems and social ways where we actually can care of each other and move beyond the kind of individualistic operating ways that we've been having. So just a quick sort of description of what the commons is. It's actually hard to have a single definition of a commons. When you kind of Google commons, there are different definitions. So I'm going to say what helps me think about the commons. So I start off with it's a paradigm. So it's a paradigm for thinking about how do we live and work as if we care about each other. It's a paradigm and an operating system for that. Many people have been doing commons over many, many years. It's in terms of the Indigenous people, this is a way of being, and we don't expect that this language to be right for Indigenous people, but this is actually, or for First Nations Australia and First Nations around the world, but it is a movement. There is a commons movement that's global that is saying, let's look at how we can share and work together and build resources together. But as a specific thing, commons, it's a dynamic of three things, which is made up of a community that is stewarding resource according to the rules that the community set. It's not just a resource, it is actually all those three things. And what we're looking at now is how do communities steward resources in this time of privatisation, in this time of, government bureaucracy. We need to we can still have those other parts of the system, but we need community to be much more central, community to bringing forward much more agency. So this is what this is about. In terms of Sydney Commons Lab, we are an informal group that is ever expanding. We're very much about how do we collaborate and cooperate. And we're very much how do we experiment in how we collaborate and cooperate. So it's been a labour of love for many of us. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. There are many of us in Sydney Commons Lab who've been putting in a lot of time. Some of it could be part of our work. Others of it is definitely contributions because we believe in this work, because we believe in this movement. And I think saying it's an experiment is really important because collaboration isn't actually easy. We can say, let's all come together and we can do it. And in many ways, we're showcasing that today. But we also know that, for instance, co-option happens through collaboration. I've only recently learned that just 1% of bush tucker food businesses are Indigenous owned. I've only just learnt that and I'm actually shocked. And so I think when we talk about building relationships and collaboration, we need to actually look at how do we not have domination? How does it not turn into one party dominating over the other as we start to build relationships and collaborate? So this is a key part when we're looking at relationships. So as I say, it's a labour of love. What have we done? We've built the Commons Transition Plan, we've developed a plan, we've been working towards this event, we've had a significant collaboration with UTS Faculty of Transdisciplinary Innovation with students. And I should say one of the students here, Annie, actually also out of that designed our logo. I do want to acknowledge that. So maybe just, can everyone who's part of the Sydney Commons Lab just wave your hands? Okay. So you can see who's there. I think people have got their organisational names there, but there's actually quite a lot of us. We're across universities, across local organisations, and we're sort of ever expanding, and we're experimenting in how we work together. Today is about making visible the ecosystem, because there are so many of us doing so many things. A number of us wanted this first event that we're having, this first significant event, to actually be about making visible the ecosystem. So hold on to your seats. There's going to be a lot of people you're going to be interested in meet or see, but we hope it's going to be exciting for you to know just what's happening around the world, in Australia, locally. And that's why the chat is also important, because it's hard for everyone to get to speak, but we want you to at least hear from some people. It's to begin to build a shared understanding of the commons and community wealth building. And we want to know what your visions are, so please share those in the chat. We did on the fly say, what are the enabling conditions for collaboration and cooperation for progressing the commons and community wealth building? What keeps emerging in all our conversations is that relationship building is essential. So that's why we've invited many of the speakers to actually talk to relationship building as well as their specific content piece. So that's going to be a major theme of today. So this is what the day looks like. We've already had the welcome to country. I've already shared with you what the themes of the day are. We're going to then move into what is the commons and communities building wealth. We're using food as an exemplar or a theme for us to look at more closely as how we increase local ownership. This is big work. So while there are some great examples that you'll be hearing, this is big work. We're talking about changing the world, really, aren't we? In Sydney, linking through Australia and globally. So let's really celebrate what we are doing and also celebrate our interconnectedness and also acknowledge this is big work. So these are steps along the way. You're also going to hear from anchor institutions, that's the large organisations that can support small. So because we're building an ecosystem, we started off when we did the Commons Transition Plan as identifying some of the local organisations, but Sydney Commons Lab has also gone, we need to start building relationships with City of Sydney, with the universities, and then we'll move to some of the other larger organisations, but these are the ones that we've started with, who can support the work of the lab, who can support the work of the local. So you'll hear what's happening in that space. Okay, and I think that's, okay, so let me say, I also want to say that Gavin Blake is here. Gavin, are you here somewhere?
I am here somewhere.
Oh, you're here somewhere, okay. So Gavin is a wonderful graphic artist, and he's going to be doing a piece of graphic art for this event. He won't be sharing it right at the end, but it will be developed and we will be sharing that with the networks. Look, the way we work at Sydney Commons Lab, mostly actually, you know what? I don't say anything. Oh, well, I just go, what do you think? What do you think? So, I mean, just to hear a few other voices, does anybody want to say anything? Just so people get hear a couple of voices from the lab. Here's Dan, looks like Dan wants to say something.
Oh, yeah, I just want to reiterate, moving out of this event, after this event, you know, we want to be able to take what we learned from today to build on and to grow. So yeah, we're really curious to hear what questions are coming up for you and what you want to hear unpacked more. And while, you know, the speakers might not get the opportunity to address those questions right here and now, we're going to go back through the chat and take out all of those questions and take out all of those curiosities. So yeah, just go for it.
Oh, and actually just something Pete's sort of saying, Trani, you've got to, you know, you can't just not say where we're going. I need to actually say where we're going. Sorry, I didn't say that. Firstly, we're actually going to continue to build the capacity of the lab. Secondly, we are going to continue to build relationships as much as we can with First Nations people and groups. And thirdly, we are looking at whether we can support a food system initiative that supports more local ownership. We're in that exploratory phase. We do want to develop a plan just a plan at this stage that can lead to a prototype. So we're hoping that this event, where we've got a bit of a theme on food with existing relationships with people who are interested in this, that we can take that a step further. So we're anticipating a couple of other meetings to see where that might go. And we're very interested in what other people are interested in. I did share as well that it is, you know, a labour of love. So we are also pacing ourselves and being careful how much we do, so that we look after ourselves, but also recognising we are part of many other ecosystems, interconnecting ecosystems. So we're not trying to be the biggest or the best. There is New Economy Network Australia. There's, I know, representative from the Grove, the Anthropocene Transition Network. There are lots of other, there's the Yeda Institute. There's lots of other groups who I know have joined today. I'm delighted that I know so many of you. So feel free to promote your networks. You know, it's a bit like when you're rowing, some people go ahead and then other people go behind. We're really all working together. We are sharing as much as we can. Use them for your work. Use these ideas, networks for your work. What we're trying to build and strengthen collaboration, cooperation, moving beyond winner takes all. Let's see how we can all support each other with our initiatives for the common good.
Awesome, T. Do you want to introduce Jess?
Isn't it lovely having some lovely support here? Okay, Jess, the gorgeous Jess Scully. Oh my God, Jess Scully. I'm so blown away by Jess, actually, to be honest. Her recent book, Glimpses of Utopia. I'm just so busy. I haven't been able to post anything about it, Jess, but I have been reading it. I haven't finished it all, but honestly, it's amazing. And it's wonderful to know that you are Deputy Mayor with the kinds of passions and beliefs that you have in your experience, your personal experience, your migrant experience, your all sorts of experience, and that you've gone around the world and actually, you know, looked and researched about what can we do to strengthen local economies, that you're about diverse voices, and also that you've been an absolute supporter of the lab. The lab has actually been a co-catalysed by so many different people, many of whom are on the call. Jess is one of them. There's been like a series of events. Then Jess ran a roundtable to look at how do we progress the commons. Then several of us, started the lab. This is a soft launch of the lab. There'll be further meetings where we might describe this in more detail. But anyway, on to Jess Scully to talk about City of Sydney and how you can progress, your role and your passion to progress the commons and communities building local wealth.
Thank you, Tarania. How do you live up to an intro like that one? Look, I just want to start by acknowledging that I am coming to you from Gadigal land, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and the next generation of the Eora Nation, and to acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I also want to acknowledge something that the Lord Mayor always does, is to acknowledge that we're meeting in one of the most diverse places in the world, and that incredible series of networks of storytelling traditions, ways of solving problems, ways of building community. That's one of the great strengths that we have in Sydney, and it's something that we need to tap into whenever we can. Also, what a group on this call, 116 participants. I've just been scrolling through and secretly screen grabbing you all because you're so fab. I mean, there's such a wealth and depth of knowledge here. Eva Cox, shout out to Eva Cox here, who has been talking about social capital for a very long time. Hi, Eva. You've got incredible people making change in the local community in so many different ways, like Kieran Kevins from the amazing Glebe Youth Service. But this is like romper room for everyone of my generation. If I get stuck shouting out everyone who's in the screen, I won't get to what I want to tell you about. But I also want to acknowledge Linda Scott, our fellow councillor at the City of Sydney. Thank you for being here, Linda, as well, and acknowledge all the awesome work of the Sydney Commons Lab. But look, I've used up a minute and a half and I have so much I need to tell you, so I'm going to be much faster. Yes, the Commons is a real passion of mine. I'm so happy that we've been able to embed commoning much more in the work of the City of Sydney. And there's three pieces of work we've been working on recently I want to tell you about, but also a whole lot of challenges I just want to kind of throw at you to have in the back of your mind over the course of this day. The first is that, yes, I did convene a Commons Lab roundtable back in 2018 at some point. And basically, we were asking, what can we do to advance commoning in Sydney? What sectors would benefit the most from commons thinking and that frame? And what are the key principles of commoning that we'd like to embed in our strategy and advocacy work as a city? So that's something that I think we're still processing and still open to receiving input from the sector on. Then last year, I requested that the city develop a local preference policy to encourage the development of jobs and the retention of wealth within our local community. So the intention there was to see how we spend money at the city. I was really heartened to see that 54% of our spend is in the local economy, but there is an opportunity for us to increase that. According to the research that city staff have done, only 12% of local businesses are registered as suppliers to the City of Sydney. And there is a huge opportunity for us to increase the representation of not just local businesses, but also beneficial and impact businesses and organisations, social enterprises, organisations from the democratic economy, the kinds of organisations that have multiplier impacts and benefits within our local community. I want you to take our money, please. So let's figure out ways to build capacity within the sector, because the City of Sydney spends $500 million a year just on goods and services. And we could be a huge amplifier of the good that you do and the benefit you bring to the community. So that's why earlier this year, in the time before COVID, I brought another motion to council, which was to develop a community wealth building policy. And that was really to position the City of Sydney as an anchor institution, of course, inspired by the work of Democracy Collaborative. Shout out to Nate, and shout out to the people at Claire's as well in the UK who are doing great work on this front. There's so much that can be gained by keeping money circulating locally, but this is where we need you. Because it is hard to actually be a supplier to an organisation like the City of Sydney. It takes a lot of work, there's a lot of paperwork involved. How can we support organisations in the ethical and beneficial economy to be suppliers? And I was very excited, Heather, to hear you volunteering some student labour for this one. So I think we should draw on that, and we should draw on all of the students and people emerging in this sector. Oh, I have so much to say and so little time. The last thing, two last things I want to tell you. As part of that work in the city, adapting our approach to community wealth building, our CEO, Monica Barone, has written to the CEOs of a whole bunch of other institutions that could be great anchor institutions, including councils, Bayside Council, Burwood, Canada Bay, Canterbury, Bankstown, Georges River, Inner West, Randwick, Waverley and Sutherland Shire. Please take this up with them and see what you can do to expand this impact. The Museum of Arts and Applied Sciences, which is the powerhouse, the local area health district, Sydney University, UNSW, UTS and TAFE. So they're just the beginning, I think, of an anchor institution network in our city that we can expand on. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the idea of anchor institutions, but really these are big organisations that can redirect our spend to do more work in our local area. And then the very last thing I want to leave with you is that work all began before COVID, but COVID has only sharpened our focus on the need for community wealth building. And when we released our COVID-19 community recovery plan, we set out 4 key recovery goals, including support for a resilient economy and community wealth building. So we want to support local procurement and promote local businesses and catalyse the changes needed to build wealth within our community as part of our recovery process. So the time is now for us to catalyse all of this forward momentum. We're working on the demand side, but we need you as the sector to work on the supply side and support the industries, support the beneficial impact and democratic sector and the social enterprise sector to be suppliers to organisations like the City of Sydney. And as has been mentioned in the comments as well, to amplify that work beyond the City of Sydney as well. So thank you for having me today. Thank you for convening this really powerful group, and I look forward to listening to the conversation.
Oh, thank you. Look, isn't that just so inspirational? That's the opportunities that Jess has just presented in front of us. We really do have a progressive council here, progressive deputy mayor, progressive council. You know, we actually are experiencing that ourselves in the way that we've been building relationships, and it's now, you know, opening up to, you know, how do we all work together to make this happen, and it's really possible. I do think Sydney's going to be an exemplar for this because of this council and because of the relationships that I know exist in these networks. So let's do it. I'd now like to, I just want to actually ask, have I got time for one more comment, Dan? Is that if I?
No, I reckon let's move on to David.
Oh, okay, all right. David, it's wonderful that you're online somewhere. I was going, where's David? Where's David? I couldn't see him, but then he texted me and said he's online. I'm going, phew. Okay, so David, how can I mean, honestly, David has been an absolute guiding light, truly, for me and for Sydney Commons Lab. I've had numerous conversations with him. I badger him, and he's also met with the lab, you know, come to our full meetings on a number of occasions so that we, you know, we slow down and we understand what's important. David has lots of metaphors, you know, look through the maze and the glaze and I don't know. David encourages us collectively and individually to be the greatest expressions of ourselves. Let's not be just about, you know, let's not just have transactional relationships. Let's actually move forward and let's absolutely celebrate, acknowledge First Nations Australians as hosts. Anyway, David, you can speak to this. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being so inspirational to us.
Oh, that's my pleasure. Hello, everyone. Hi, Yvonne. Thank you for the welcome. I was born here on the block, Redfern, Gadigal country. My family are from central west New South Wales. I'm a Wiradjuri man. And I've been at the city for 16 years. Acknowledge Councillor Scully and Councillor Scott. Not sure if I can see any others. The funny thing on my screen, Tarani, is I'm actually right next to you. So, you know, the brain plays funny minds, right? Funny tricks. So, Dan, are you being the timekeeper here? Is that correct? Yeah?
I am indeed, yeah. You've got about
great.
4.5 minutes left.
Okay, sweet. All right. So what we're going to do is just try and condense 60,000 years into 4 minutes, okay? Now, thank you, Tarania, and to Sydney Commons for all this. I just want to, as Tarania has sort of alluded to, share some insights and both professional and personal and experiences. Sometimes it gets emotional for me. But the bottom line here is when I was introduced to Sydney Commons, I saw the value of what you were setting to achieve. I'll just correct you on one word, Tarani, it's to become the greatest expression. Because what that does is it then compels us to understand that, and I think this is the general consensus here, that the current status quo is not acceptable. So in order to do that, then you've got to, excuse me, you've got to compel oneself individually and collectively to aspire to something that is greater than the current circumstances. And in that instance, I don't impose a vision. Mine is to become the greatest expression of myself. And that then sets me on a journey of you know, acting on that every day to the best of my ability. And in a sense, that's what we're doing at the city. We changed the narrative at the city. The old narrative of reductionist and deficit narrative took the value of who we are as First Nations people on our ancestral homelands, it took it away, and it suffocated the opportunity of all Australians to understand what it truly means to share in this identity and indeed share in the resources and the future potential of what we could, should, and would become. But if that's predicated on, and I'm going to come back to these two words, commons and trust, and the very predication of the existence of the past 230 years is based on those two words. The stolen lands, and we're actually seeing this now play out, people, the use of our ancestors as slave labor to prop up the wealth based on the commonwealth for the common people. Well, the reality is it went to one group of people. And that then, to add indignation, went into trusts, trust accounts. Well, trust is one of the greatest enablers in every human being. It's in every single one of us. And we have to be realistic in asking who broke the trust when they sailed in through these lands. Sovereignty was never ceded. We need to understand this. If we do not understand it, then we do not chart that course, as Tarania said. We do not identify the haze, the maze, and the glaze. And therefore, how do we chart a course if we do not understand it? So the reality of the truth is sometimes uncomfortable for people, but I just bring it back to this value proposition. And I'll give you an example. When you see successive federal governments talk about us as a problem, I reject that. And then there's a great saying, people know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Yeah. Well, what we've done at the city is we brought back the value of who we are as First Nations people on our ancestral homelands. And we haven't imposed that on anybody. We've invited people to look through our lens, and it's a very different approach. Another saying, Tarania, thank you, is that I made up on my journey through the city is all cents, C-E-N-T-S, make dollars, but not all dollars make sense, S-E-N-S-E, right? So make of that what you will, folks. The reality is, and I've seen it in this, is when we default to a new economic system, that actually puts my red flags up. Because the reality is, as Yvonne said, we have and will continue to share, barter, swap, and guess what? We actually evolved into this new economy too. But if you look at the three major industries that built the backbone of this country, and remember what we said, slave labor was used to do that, and it's playing out in these courts right now. We all know this. Housing, construction, and food. And ask yourself, did you see any Aboriginal person at any form of sharing in that wealth building for the common? The reality is no. You saw them at the very bottom of that rung. So the reality is, in these new economies of the digital space and the information technology and all these great things, we need, and this is what we're doing at the city, we are charting our course in understanding better Indigenous cultural and intellectual property rights. Again, if you don't understand it, then you should not be charting a course through it. And that's what we're doing at the city. I think Monica might touch on that later. These are some of the things that are profoundly different in our approach in making sure that we also don't deny First Nations people access to their ancestral lands. And, you know, look, I'll finish. How much longer I got there, Dan?
You're done.
I'm done. Oh, you didn't give me a bell. Did you give me a bell? I didn't hear it.
I tried to, sorry.
You should have done it like the town crier and go
did
like
anyone
that
else
next
hear
time.
it? Yeah, I need a physical thing here.
Yeah. All right. Well, then there you go. So thank you.
Seconds. Again. No, we can. It's 30 seconds to finish. 30 seconds.
Yeah.
To finish.
If you want to just take another 30 seconds and close it out, that's fine.
All right. Well, look, I'll just finish on these points. Thank you. My guiding principles, and again, I don't impose this on anybody because I know what that feels like. I was taken from my mother and I never got to meet her, and she drank herself to death. The beautiful gift that she gave me. Sorry. As I said, it gets emotional. My heritage goes back 50,000 years in this country. Every part of an imposed system sought to take that from me, from my communities, from my culture, So when you want to engage with First Nations people, do it with dignity, do it with respect, do it with authenticity, and do it with money. And if you can't answer the why, you don't understand the why, and this is what Tarani and I have spoken about, then you really need to ask yourselves what you're doing in this space. Because we are at a crossroads, we are at an opportunity, but we need to be realistic. So I'll leave you with this last little thing, and I say to people all the time, you've got two eyes for two reasons. One is your instinct and the other is your intuition. Go with your instinct and be guided by your intuition, because those are the things that help us understand that haze, maze and glaze, and importantly, chart a course through that haze, maze and glaze. So I thank you, and I'm looking forward to, I think I'm going to be on some other little thing with this later. So thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, David. And you know how I said relationship building is a big theme. So relationship building is actually about listening. So in terms of what that means with David, for instance, is listening. So hearing what he is saying, understanding it, having the same conversation again sometimes to understand it at a deeper level. Yeah, relationship building is, and listen, you know, David certainly listens to me as well. So it's about listening to each other. And with the commons and with what we're talking about today, with particular values in mind, values that you know, acknowledge First Nations people, as has happened in Welcome to Country and in other people's speeches, and looking at how we can move forward, and acknowledging each other and looking at how we can move forward. Okay. So now we're moving into the space. Oh, here we go. The space of, it's kind of the commons and community wealth building, growing the commons and community wealth building. So we're showing you a number of faces because once again, you're going to see quite a number of people speaking. So we're going to start with international speakers, Michelle Bowens and Nate Stevens, Michelle from P2P Foundation and Nate from Democracy Collaborative. Actually, sorry, we'll start with Michelle and then we'll actually start with our Sydney Commons Lab people who are looking at the Commons, who have been working on the Commons Transition Plan, Jodie Hampson and Inka Santala. So let's actually start there. So first of all, just to introduce you to Michelle. Michelle, founder of P2P Foundation, is a global expert thought leader research on the commons and incredibly peer-to-peer. You know, I connected with Michelle because other people in my networks introduced me to him, and I just sent a message to him, and within a couple of hours he responded. I was quite blown away. And then we started a relationship on social media. And then I got the opportunity to host a couple of events with some other great people with Michelle. And that generosity of Michelle and that openness and that ability to build relationship such that we could do work together. And now 2 years later, he's really guiding us and supporting us as well with the lab. I get to talk to Michelle lots of times and he's just, yeah, amazing inspiration as well and generous and a true commons person. So Michelle, over to you. Oh, is he here? Have we lost him?
Can you hear me?
Oh, you're here. We can't. Oh, there you are. Sorry, I'm apologies. I'm not used to this, so I'm not sure which screen I'm looking at. So apologies if I look a bit big. I'm looking at you now. So much. Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's 6:46 a.m. here. I don't get up that early every day. I would like to highlight kind of two scenarios when we engage in commoning and creating shared resources for our community. And so one is a bit like more bottom up and one is a bit more with the collaboration of institutions. I want to show the difference. So one of the things that happened recently that to all of us, you know, with COVID, is that we saw a substantial amount of market and state weakness, if not failure in some countries, where the supply chains were disrupted, there was not enough beds in the hospital, couldn't get ventilators. And I don't think this has happened before in history, where millions of people in a matter of just a few weeks, mobilize around the maker spaces and the fab labs to actually make themselves all the things that were missing in the hospital. And it was like a really spontaneous bottom-up self-organization at a really substantial scale of complexity that showed that what skillful citizens can do when they self-organize to solve issues. But it was done in very difficult circumstances because on the other side, nothing was ready to accept these inputs. So there was numerous problems in actually getting the stuff to the hospitals because people were afraid of legal liability and all kinds of things. And so in a way, the negative side of this emergence was to see how unprepared our institutions were to collaborate with this kind of new possibility. And so that brings me then to the second scenario where you actually see this kind of cooperation. This is an example from Italy, which I mentioned to Tirania in our last conversation, where the city of Bologna a few years ago, based on a new article in the Constitution of Italy, which is around the notion of subsidiarity. And so what that means is that it says now in the Italian constitution that problems should be solved at the lowest appropriate level. Doesn't mean necessarily the lowest level, but at the lowest appropriate level. And that gave the city of Bologna the opportunity to craft a regulation that allowed the people of Bologna to say, we want to care for a resource, and to be recognized by the city, and where the city acted as a convener of support for the citizens. And this is what's called a quintuple helix model, where the city, the business sector, the formal NGOs, the research organizations, so those four coalesce to help the fifth, which is active citizens, to work together on shared resources. And this regulation has been taken over by 250 other Italian cities and has mobilized 1 million people so far. So I just want to say this, that it does make a difference when you get public commons or public social or public citizens cooperation protocols. So it's not just about the relationship between individuals. That's of course very important, and I might say something about it, but it's also about institutional cooperation. And I think that what it means for me is that the commons should be recognized as a human institution. So not just something that happens on the margins by volunteers, but as a, next to the market institutions and the state institutions, as a really core part of human civilization. And so this brings me to the connection with the community wealth development movement, which I think is very close, because what they are doing, in my view, is creating the material basis for new types of ownership that can coexist with these activities of the citizens. So this is an anecdote from a food co-op, which started the food co-op movement years ago, maybe 2 decades ago, if not more. So it's called the Park Slope Food Co-op in Brooklyn. And when you talk to them, they're very clear. The only reason we survived is because we survived gentrification because we owned our building, right? So it's not enough to have goodwill. You have to have the capacity to access forms of capital and resources. And so in that sense, the capacity to own collectively the resource that we're going to use is something absolutely crucial. I just want to say also something more personal. I'm not sure where I'm going with this myself, but I just want to mention it before closing. So the traditional way, and and I'm not judging it, because for many people there's no other choice, but it's part of the mainstream psychology. So the idea is you have to find a job, and only if you have a job you can do something, right? And unfortunately, in that situation, only 1 out of 5 people, this has been studied, feel motivated that their work actually corresponds to what they want to do with their lives. So it's a very low level of passionate engagement for most people. And so what we see in the world of peer production, which is, the other side of the commons, when people self-organize to create value together and to distribute it in a different way, what you start with is really your passion, your passionate engagement. So a lot of people call peer production passionate production. This means that 100% of the people that are with you are going to be passionately engaged in doing what they're doing. And because they are passionate, because they're building and self-organizing something together, they will create community. And because they create community, they create an economy around them. So if you look at the first phase of, the reintroduction of the commons in our modern societies, the open source and free software and open design movement, this was already in 2011, 1/6 of GDP in the United States. So all the activities around shared resources were already engaging 17 million people in 2011. That's huge. And so now we move to the phase where we can actually produce things physically. And I just want to give you one example, and please ring the bell when I have to stop. So I discovered recently that there was a network in Europe of 120 multi-factories. So what are these people doing? They are basically craftspeople who work with materials, wood, iron, 3D printing, and they usually find, factories in the, port regions of the cities, which, because of the industrialization, they are cheaper and they can find them. They use open source and cooperative principles. And so there's 120 of them already in Europe making stuff every day. And together they also work on what they call their invisible factory. So, and that's the place, the virtual place, if you like, where they do everything together, where they collaborate, where they share their designs. And so this is kind of my message today. It's that it's something that is very, very practical, very economical. It creates meaningful activity, jobs in the local economy. So it really calls for, I think, a more conscious public policy where the city becomes an enabler and an empowerer of social and individual autonomy. And, we call this the commons of capacities. So it's kind of a marriage of Amartya Sen and his capacity building with Ostrom and her ideas about the commons. And so the role of the public sector is to maintain and develop the equal capacity of all citizens to contribute to the commons, to see where the weak points are, because this is, of course, something that could happen and maybe does happen, is that people who have to have 2 jobs to survive may not have a lot of time to engage passionately in other activities, right? They're kind of punished because of their need to survive. And so this is where I think the city can come in, is to be this commons of the commons that make sure that every citizen can contribute to the common good, and does whatever is necessary to enable that capacity. So I think that's the story I wanted to share.
Thanks, Michelle.
And so I'm speaking from Chiang Mai here in northern Thailand, and really happy to connect with you people in Sydney.
Wow, thank you so much, Michelle. And I also want to say, I didn't quite say, Michelle's also had a key role in the catalysing of Sydney Commons Lab. It was the events that we ran with him that really inspired people, that then we went on to the roundtable and so on and so forth. So thank you, Michelle, and for all the time that you continue to give all of us. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And that, isn't it wonderful if you start integrating what Jess was talking about in terms of the procurement policy, the community wealth building, sort of looking at how city can actually do more community wealth building in Sydney. And then you combine David's acknowledgement, inclusion, more than inclusion, that's not quite the right word, First Nations people. And then Michelle also talking about the ecosystem, the Commons ecosystem, where people are doing what they're passionate about, which I think many of us in Sydney Commons Lab would identify with, and I know many other people on the call. And we're combining, like, you know, we're in the mainstream system, we need to live and we need to earn money, but also we need to do stuff we believe in and we're passionate about, and we need to build an ecosystem with co-ops, not-for-profits, social enterprises, government, local government, universities, anchor institutions support us. You're starting to get the picture. Who we have here can really work together to build an ecosystem that works for all. Okay, now on to beautiful Jodie Hampson, who was the lead author of the Sydney Commons Transition Plan. Been absolutely delightful to work with Jodie. Because of time, I'm actually going to keep going. But Jodie, please, you've just got a few minutes to introduce yourself and your wonderful work and whatever else with Sydney Commons Transition Plan, and anything you'd say about significance of relationships in part of this too. Thank you.
Thanks, Tarania. I think, you know, I just want to reiterate, well, first of all, I'm on Wurundjeri land, so it's a different context here in Melbourne. And thank you, Michelle, for bringing in the COVID context, because I think the Commons is even more important. And seeing, you know, these hopeful, you know, stories and the way people are working together to get through a really difficult time. So we're kept separated in Melbourne at the moment. So, you know, this the Commons and sharing, I'm really keen to stay connected, and you know, it's become even more important, as I'd said. So in terms of the plan, reiterating some of the key points that Michelle had mentioned. So I think I was attracted to the lab and the Commons work because it provides an umbrella for the great work so many people are already doing, and it gives the power back to individuals to develop a livelihood in ways that are nourishing of environment and community. It also highlights the importance of community working in active participation with our decision makers, such as the council. So it's great to have them on board in terms of protecting what we truly value. And in terms of what we truly value, you know, Tarania keeps mentioning relationship building. It's key to everything that the Sydney Commons Lab does and the Common Transition. We know that restoring how we relate to one another beyond the competition and transaction that's prioritised in the market is pivotal to our collective survival. We all know that. I think that's why we're on this call. And the plan, the Common Transition Plan for the City of Sydney, can be seen as a conversation starter for the lab in continuing to build those local relationships that are so important. So the aims of the plan are to highlight the valuable work already happening, contributing to the Commons across the sectors, to share the learnings of this network, to bring in the often fragmented work into a collaborative network for increased impact, and also to identify the broader supports that are necessary for amplifying these and similar types of initiatives. And that included providing some concrete strategy and policy directions for Council's Sustainable Sydney 2050 plan. One of the strategy directions is to prioritise commons-oriented projects and localised community wealth building, which is, you know, in accordance with why we're here today. Oh, I'll end there, I think.
Oh, you got 30, that's 30 seconds. That's
great,
30
I think that's good. So for me personally, it was really inspiring to connect with the 25 plus individual organisations through the plan, to hear their stories, including their immense personal sacrifices. And just building on what Tarania said about relationships and listening, I think it's also about showing some of that vulnerability, realising we don't all have the answers, and working together and muddling through to you know, create that path that we all desire, but having the courage to walk that together. So thank you, Daniel, also earlier, for being vulnerable and sharing that. That really meant a lot, I know, to all of us. So anyway, a lot of the people that contributed to the plan are here today, and I really look forward to hearing more from them. It's very exciting to be here with you. So I know Bronwyn's going to discuss the next phase of the plan a little bit later, so I'll leave that there for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jodie. And I just love, you know, when we first met, we kind of gave time to building our own relationship so that we have a relationship of trust. So when issues come up, we just pick up the phone, we sort it out, done. But we've actually built, and we continue to build that. So I just love it. Love working with you, Jodie. And so now I have less time to do long introductions, but so I want to pass you immediately on to Inka Santala, who's co-founder of the Sharing Map, which has anyway, I'll let Inka explain that, and she's also doing amazing PhD work. So Inka, if you can introduce yourself and speak. Where are you?
Thank you, Tirania, and thank you, Jodie, for the great summary of the Commons Transition Plan work, and also great to have you joining all the way from Melbourne. Yeah, so as Tirania said, my name is Inka Santala, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Wollongong, where I currently do my research on sharing cities. And in my project, I've sought to understand and document the more commons-based and citizen-led sharing initiatives in the city, exploring more of their generative potential to create new kinds of urban agency and collective capacities for just a sustainable urban transition. As part of my research, I've been involved with the Sydney Commons Lab from the beginning, but also, as Tirania mentioned, in the sharingmap.com.au project, which is an online database of all the alternative sharing initiatives in the city. And this database also worked as a starting baseline for the Commons Transition Plan work that we did last year. But yeah, sharing a little bit insights from my own research based on my observations and interviews. What I found that in addition to the more structural transformation as put forward in the transition plan, like prioritizing funding for the initiatives that empower communities to help themselves or breaking the silo up mentalities to enable sharing and accumulation of the knowledge built, there's also a need for more ideological and social change. And by this, I mean shifting the focus from the direct material benefits of these initiatives to the actual nature of the urban agency and the relationships within them. And by recognizing the multiplicity of their common practices and behaviors, citizens are already engaged in the city, then helps to diversify their roles beyond the typical user-consumer kind of identities. And this enables then challenging the more contemporary, profit-oriented and individualistic urban norms, but also creates a better understanding of these local initiatives as not only responses or kind of forms of resistance to the existing urban conditions, but also diverse reflections of these. So they're always enabled and motivated, but also complexly intertwined by the local conditions, not meaning that they are also able to reshape them in which they emerge. And of this, I'm sure we'll get some great examples and demonstrations of today, which I'm also excited to hear. And yeah, that's all that I had today. I'm looking forward to hearing from the other presenters as well.
Thank you, Inka. And I also want to say also about Inka that it's wonderful to have Inka as part of the group, because Inka is an incredibly strong advocate for the small local organisations. So when we're actually looking at our strategies and we move forward, and we're talking about working with anchor institutions, she was absolutely going, we just have to be careful that the small ones don't get dominated by the large ones. This is one of the themes for our work, and it's really important as we build our relationship with City of Sydney and the universities, that the small local organisations, the individual citizens, continue to have agency at the same time as getting support, that all our agendas are taken into account. So thank you, Inka, for being such a strong advocate for that consistently.
Thank you, Tirania.
Yeah.
This is just a very brief appendix, really, to sort of ground what all this wonderful input from the other threads we've been hearing into telling you about essentially the appendix to the process that Jodie described with the Sydney Commons Transition Plan. So there were, as she said, a number of us on the lab that worked on that plan, and that was, you've shared the link, which I'll share again shortly. which we released about August last year, but it was always intended to be an ongoing conversation in two directions. One, with broadening the sort of grassroots citizens and projects and initiatives that we, something exactly like this. It's so exciting to be here to think, what would it mean? Actually, maybe it's overwhelming to think, what would it mean to co-edit the second version with the 116 people I think we've still got here? But that's one of the inputs that we want for the second version and the ongoing living version of the plan. And the other is to speak directly into policy processes. And that's part of the reason for having a written plan, that it's a document that those who see like a state, if you like, there's a famous book called Seeing Like a State. And I think there's something really true in what the speakers have been saying about, especially Michelle, when we were saying, can the state actually recognize the people that are producing these new kinds of value? Is it possible for governments and bureaucratic institutions like universities and so on to recognize the enormous potential of the kinds of projects that we see here? And how can we help that happen? And Jess Scully spoke earlier to the ways in which the council is working on getting that into policy, and we want to contribute to that from both ends. So what we've done basically, and I'm just going to put in a couple of links. They didn't. Yeah. So this, I've just put in the plan link again, and we've drafted a short appendix to the plan where we went back to some of the stakeholders that we worked with for the first version. That's my duck telling me to stop. And asked them how they thought the duck must stop. I can't do it. The two related, community wealth building, and just really there are two threads in there, and you're all welcome to read and contribute to this ongoing process. But broadening, so much of what Nate said about community wealth building does resonate with commons, but we think the commons angle is going to perpetually prod the institutions like the governments and the universities to keep pushing on their own boundaries of what is meant by wealth, what is meant by community, to broaden the sense of value that's inherent in wealth, to broaden the depth of inclusion that's about community, and to broaden the practices of sharing resources. And most of all, again, going back to Michelle's point, I want to reiterate, I love the way he said, community wealth building is creating the material basis for commons projects. And, it is a new system, and it's really a new system of property law and land and ownership in a really deep way that's immensely challenging. And I think David Barrow has mentioned in the chat the issues of power which that raises. So I hope I think we'll get to that right now.
Okay, so now we move on to Nate Stevens from Democracy Collaborative. Democracy Collaborative in the US actually coined the term community wealth building. I do also want to acknowledge some of you on the call may know Jason Twill, who's been part of the lab and involved in design and architecture. And he introduced us to Democracy Collaborative and Nate. And then Nate and I have been able to build, both of us really believe in building the relationship. So we've had lots of individual calls, which I think is once again really important for the work, that you get to know each other, get to build on strengths and work together. So so I'd actually like Nate now to introduce yourself and the Democracy Collaborative, and discuss community wealth building and the relationship piece. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tarania. It is such a privilege to be here with all of you today. And I'm going to pull up some slides here just to have a visual reference. And while I do, I just want to say how thrilling and refreshing and encouraging it is to be hearing all of you talking about this as a project of decolonialization from the start. I think that's already giving you a great head start on several other cities who are approaching something similar. When we talk about decolonization, I talk a lot in this work about a big part of it being unlearning what we think an economy is, what we think the economy is for. So really quickly, and I know we have Tarania has an amazing lineup of folks speaking today. But the boilerplate definition of community wealth building is right here. I'm sure Tarania can share slides after the fact. but I think it's really helpful to break down each of the words. I think the Democracy Collaborative was quite intentional with this term, which really, I also just want to be very transparent. I think community wealth building is a concept and a model that in many ways is a modern intellectualization of what many cultures have been doing throughout history, and many non-Western cultures have how many communities have been living and thriving throughout time. So community, starting there. For me, this really means centering racial equity in economic development and economic policy. And also community voice. I saw in the chat somewhere that someone emphasized the importance of community power in all of this, which we really can't forget is essential. Wealth is crucial and really I think underpins TDC's theory of change, that ownership of assets and I would say process, so management of assets matters. So who benefits from the anchor institutions in the community, who benefits from the city's procurement and hiring and investment, all of those kinds of questions. Ownership is essential. And I like breaking it down this way because I think the last word is also really important and gets left out a lot. And it's the word that's I think is really important to remember. And that's that we're building something new. And it's really been exciting since I met Tarania to hear about the explicitly experimental approach of the Commons Lab and really acknowledging and being aware of the fact that we're building new systems, new relationships, new processes, and new capacities. And we don't exactly know where this is headed. So we need to experiment our way there. So that's what community wealth building means. It's also, it can be useful, I think, to have a mental map of this systems view of what is the local economic system that is building community wealth. And some of you might be familiar with Preston, a fairly small-sized city in England that has really taken up community wealth building as the municipal economic development model. And you can see in this simple graphic how their local institutions are connected. And you can see a lot of these are resource flows of actual assets and resources, cash going between the local government and worker cooperatives, the hospital and worker cooperatives. But I think it's really helpful to remember that it isn't only financial capital that makes this work. We can think about many other kinds of capital that are just as important and that institutions and individuals can lend to this ecosystem building approach as well. Intellectual capital, cultural capital. There are a lot of things that we need to keep in mind beyond just the dollar amount. I include this image just because I think it's so important to remember that this is really what we're tackling. I think many of you are probably familiar with the parable of the blind man and the elephant. It was great to hear the introductions and hear what a diverse representation of the ecosystem is here. You're all experiencing the elephant of Sydney differently based on which part of the system you touch in your work and life. And so it's really important to have spaces like this to come together and build a shared understanding of what is this thing? Great. I just want to close. Well, if we have 30 seconds, I can just briefly touch on this. What we're talking about here is systems change. Tarania said we're changing the world with this. We're not just hoping to support a few women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses. This is really about fundamentally changing the way things work. And in doing that, we need to remember the kinds of questions we're asking. And in this work, if we're really looking to transform and not just to improve, we really need to be asking, how do I make sense of this? What is our core purpose? And I think the way this conversation has been unfolding and the connection to personhood and to the relational component bodes really well for this group. I think thinking deeply about whose perspective matters is crucial if this is going to work. And then the last thing I want to emphasize is just that this work requires building new capacities. We're imagining working differently in this next economic system. So as many of you represent larger institutions, we need to learn to collaborate with humility and to follow community. Action learning, we don't have it figured out, so we need to learn as we go. And really keeping an eye on the forest and the trees, not losing the big story and vision for the details and tactics that we need to get there. Otherwise, I'm, like I said, thrilled to be here with you all and really excited to follow along on the Sydney Commons Lab journey. Thanks for inviting me, Tarania.
Thank you, Nate. That was a great, oh gosh, so much more we need to learn from you and from Democracy Collaborative. Thank you so much. Okay, so Bronwyn Morgan is now going to talk about the next phase of the Commons Transition Plan and how community wealth building is being incorporated in it. I just want to say Bronwyn from UNSW, Professor of Law, is just amazing to always, I don't know, I just find she's my go-to person around lots of the content, very consistent. I don't know how she juggles so many things in her life and work, but it's always great to know Bronwyn is there. So thank you, Bronwyn.
Thank you, Tarania.
Okay, thank you so much, Bronwyn. Dan, how are we tracking for time?
Looking great. Let's keep moving.
We keep moving, so we've got the time that, okay, great. Okay, so at this point, I just wanted to, just a few minutes just to check in. I don't know whether David Beaumont, you feel like saying anything now. I just want to give you an opportunity to have a voice from what you've heard. You may or may not want to say something, but I would love to hear from you if you do. Yep, great.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, you know me, Tarania. I can talk.
You got 2 or 3 minutes.
What's that?
I'm going to say you got a couple minutes.
Yeah, cool. I just wanted to just remind people of, and I think Pete just put it up there again. It's just reflecting on when I was talking with Tarania in the group about the heading of community wealth building, yeah, and you know, in the context again of this country, what that said to me, and when I sort of suggested to you, you know, these beautiful things that unite us, every single human being on the planet around instinct and intuition. The heading of community wealth building said to me, you're just pushing the same narrative, you're just pushing the same thing, and it's going to go to the same people. And yes, that's the cynical part in me, but again, the generosity that I see with Sydney Commons is that they understood that I wasn't imposing that, and so I offered up a suggestion, and you guys saw the value of that, and that's my point. And that's why you now adopted your new heading, which still talks to community wealth building, but it's actually communities building wealth. And that to me says, I want to be a part of that. And so right from the very beginning, you know, another lesson that I've learned in life, professional and personal, is, and I said this to Tarania the other day, you know, if you want to get your point across, you've got to be across your point. And part of the relationship with Tarania and myself is about, you know, this opportunity of engaging with First Nations people in a visceral way, as she touched on, you know, not us feeling like we're being treated as guests in our homelands. We're not guests. We are the hosts. We have relationships with one another, with Mother Earth, and with all the beautiful elements, and they are embedded in our living cultures. And so that is part of the gift that comes to celebrating the identity of what it truly means to be Australian. But, you know, another word that you guys adopted was cultivating the space, and that's what we've always said at the city. Part of what I say is I don't talk to the role in this place. I talk to the soul. I talk with the soul. It's a very different proposition. You notice I acknowledge Councillor Scully and Councillor Scott. That's my choice. Yeah. but that choice for me is a mark of respect. And all we ask as First Nations people is that the intellect and that respect is reciprocated. Indigenous ideology and philosophy is predicated around subject, not object. You know? Consumption over ideology is what is consuming this planet and indeed us. Whereas ideology over consumption, there is a balance and we can find that. Is that my bell there, Dan?
Yeah, that's probably.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much, David. And absolutely, I am glad you brought that up. Absolutely want to acknowledge that we changed the title to Communities Building. We also added Common, and that was in conversation with David, Communities Building Commonwealth. It was putting communities first, warmer, engaging. Yeah, and I spoke, and Nate absolutely appreciates that. I just want to say too, we've had that conversation too. Absolute appreciation. So thank you. Now we're sort of wanting to, the next up we have Tim Lacerdo from Democracy in Colour. Tim, are you there? I'm sure you are, but yes, woohoo. And David Barry from Sydney Alliance. Now, we'd already developed our program, right? And here I am, a woman of colour. And as you see, many of the people, or most of the people, are actually white. And I'm thinking, this doesn't feel very right. Of course, we're starting to build relationships with First Nations people, but and you know, with Black Lives Matter, with everything that's going on, everything that's being raised, need to be more proactive now with people of colour and with the groups who are working with the more marginalised organisations. So I contacted Tim and David, and Tim, I kind of introduced myself. David, I've known for some time, and we've been talking about all this work and how we can work together. And I said, Tim, I just wanted, you know, I really want to include you in this program, but it's already packed. And I don't know whether it's appropriate to even ask you to come. I don't want to ask you to attend, that feels wrong. And you should be there, you know, your group or who you represent should be here from the beginning. So there's only like a minute. Would you want to even come and speak for a minute? And he went, yeah. He went, yeah. It's a little bit more than a minute, but not much more. And David too. And I guess my approach, or our approach to working with different groups, is collaboration. It doesn't mean we all have to be on a given meeting, all the diversity has to be there. It's how do we collaborate so that Tim leads, or with Democracy Collaborative, they lead these initiatives. Maybe we'll still work together. Maybe he'll just go, great, fine, I'm not really keen to work with Sydney Commons Lab. Got the ideas now though, and we'll go over there, and then when I'm ready, we'll collaborate. I don't know. This is why we're experimenting with collaboration. We're looking at how do we work together? How do we each have agency? How do we have take leadership? We're not expecting people to come into our space and we're the lead. We're co-leading. And we're sharing information. I'm learning from other networks all the time. We're sharing. Today, we're sharing our learnings and our networks. So anyway, with that, I'd just like to invite Tim to say a few words. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for having me. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're on. I'm personally on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, but wherever we are on this continent, we're all on stolen land, and sovereignty was never ceded. So I work at Democracy in Colour. It's a racial and economic justice organisation led by people of colour. And we do a lot of advocacy around economic fairness and anti-racism. And then the second thing we do is a lot of leadership development and capacity building work designed to strengthen the political voice of communities of colour. So I was asked to share a little bit about how I feel about being here at the formation of the Sydney Commons Lab. And I really don't think, you know, it could be more timely. We're seeing worldwide right now the devastating consequences of a system that values profit over life. We're facing the worst humanitarian crisis since the Second World War. There's an economic crisis in Lebanon, a political crisis in Ethiopia. There are wars in Syria and Yemen. There's a refugee crisis that saw 79 million people displaced last year. And then there's an impending hunger pandemic that sees the World Food Programme warn of the potential for famine in 36 countries. On top of all of that, we're tearing our planet apart. We're hurtling towards a climate catastrophe. We're grappling with police violence, Indigenous over incarceration, and Black deaths in custody. And then there's COVID-19, this once in a generation global pandemic that has revealed a lot, not just about who we are, but who we were, and the kinds of fractures and inequalities that already existed in our society. So I think it is beyond clear that our status quo doesn't work for working people, and that continuing with business as usual is an actual existential threat. And that's why I'm so excited about the Sydney Commons Lab, because it is building in collaboration a society that prioritises the collective good over special interests and maximises human potential over corporate greed, and is building a society that fundamentally at its core is about equipping all people with the opportunities they need to live meaningful and happy lives. And I think it's also just inspiring generally to be here with so many people and to be part of a community that's rooted in relationship building, because that's fundamentally what it's going to take to win, because we are doing with people what the other side does with money. And the only way we beat organised money is with organised people. So I'll leave it there. But thanks so much for having me and for this really inspiring initiative and all the people that are here today.
Oh, thank you, Tim. On to you, David.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's David Barra, lead organiser at Sydney Alliance. I'm calling in from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. The Sydney Alliance is 40 organisations, religious, community and unions that come together to make the city a better place through the actions of community organising. We go from Cowan to Katoomba down to Camden to the coast. And the thing that binds together these very diverse organisations is relationships. It's the relational meeting, a radical one-to-one meeting that builds trust. Earlier, we heard David talking about talking to the soul, and that's what we do with relational meetings. Any plans for the Commons to scale up, to supercharge, is not just going to happen from individuals. It's going to happen by organisations getting on board. And we're going to need to build trust beyond the usual suspects in the inner west, the eastern suburbs and the universities. And it's great to see some people from Western Sydney on the call. Shout out to Richard and Maria. And to do that, we need to recognise that organisations play a formative part in people's lives. And we want to create that space within the Alliance. This is an invitation to all of you in the Sydney Commons Lab to be part of the vehicle that can move some of this work forward. And whether or not we want to be upfront with the democratic franchise, bringing together community commons and democracy, or scale up the work, or engage in systems change, we're going to have to tackle the tension that comes from the contest of power. Part of our work in the Alliance can be bringing organisations together for prefigurative projects that imagine the world as it could be. But some of our work really will require taking on the power that doesn't want to change. And the only thing that we have to tackle big business, big media, big tech, or the establishment power in Macquarie Street or Canberra is people power. And that's what we bring to the table, and that's what we want to do. Two projects that we're exploring right now that fit very interestingly with the work that we're doing with Commons is really highlight the fact that the people who are affected by the issues have to be at the forefront of those solutions. We have international students and temporary migrants working together to organise community wealth creation through getting their private vet colleges on board and engaged to tackle international student exploitation. With Voices for Power, we have migrant communities coming together across Western Sydney to look for renewable and affordable solutions for power. If you want to be part of this work, we want to be part of it with you, and check out the links in the chat. Thanks.
Woohoo! Woohoo! Thank you, David. Thank you, Tim. Just absolutely awesome for those contributions to have you here. We're now I need to hand you over to Dan, because there's a bit of time for all of you on the call to actually talk with each other. So on to Dan.
So yeah, we're going to move into groups of 4 now using the breakout rooms, and we invite you to introduce yourselves and what curiosities are coming up for you through what's been shared so far. And you know, we're not prescriptive about this conversation. Take it in any direction it wants to go. And so we've got about 17 minutes now by the time we sort of split out into groups. So yeah, take the time to share and just have a bit of a chat. And when you know, when you're sort of happy with the conversation, you're welcome to take time until 11:50 when we'll be coming back together. If you need to, just stand up and stretch your legs or anything like that. But yeah, we'll reconvene at 11:50. So yeah, in our breakout rooms, introduce yourselves and what curiosities are coming up for you, and back together at 11:50.
Well, we are going to give you a 5-minute, like at the end, there's going to be a bit of a countdown. So if you haven't grabbed a cup of coffee, you've got 5 minutes where we'll say you've got 5 minutes left to get your coffee and come back. So it's not a long break. If you need more, if you need to take the whole thing as a break, you can, but we're suggesting you talk with each other and then have the last 5 minutes as a get your coffee.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we're going into food systems. So we realize this is a big long event, but we hope you'll come back with us. See you soon. Okay. On to our lovely tech people.
Do you want to go to your room, Tradi, or are you going to stay here?
No, I'll stay here.
Okay, now I can.
Yep, you can hear me? Yep, all works? Great. Hi, oh Tom, you're there. I was wondering if you got in. Woohoo, it's good to see your profile. Okay, hello everyone. Great to see you coming back. Woohoo. Okay.
Wow, that was so wholesome.
Was it? So good. So cool. Okay. Oh, some different faces who I didn't see in the front. Oh, lovely. Lovely to see you all. Okay. Are we all back or? Okay, so Kirsten, where are you? Are you around? Anyway.
I am here.
You're
Yes.
here. Woohoo! Okay, so just introducing you to Kirsten Larson, who will be leading this next section on how we can increase ownership of our local food systems. So as in when and how, or let's talk about it. So Kirsten's from Open Food Network Australia. I'm not quite sure how we met recently. Somehow we realised that we wanted to chat with each other. I think I sent a connection on LinkedIn. And, you know, our first meeting was like an hour just to relate. And then we had a few others and we didn't know quite what we'd do. And then here she is. So awesome. I'll leave it to you, Kirsten, to introduce yourself and the session. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate. I feel slightly like an interloper being down here. I'm on Bangarang country in the northeast of Victoria, and yeah, acknowledge that this sovereignty was never ceded and pay my respects to the Bangarang and all other First Nations. Yeah, so this session that we're moving into now is how we apply all of these ideas into food. Just commenting on Michelle's comment in the chat. Michelle, I'm not actually doing my 5 minutes until a bit later, so you might miss out, but we can catch up soon. So basically in this section, we're hearing from a number of people, some of whom are in Sydney, some of whom are not, about work in food systems around commons and about what the opportunities might be. We're pretty time constrained, so there's going to be, I think I've made a few adjustments. I think we'll try and have 5 minutes of chat at the end using the chat, as well as some comments from the panelists. But mostly we're going to be having 5 minutes from people explaining what they're doing in the food system and how important relationship building and the commons is to that, and what, you know, and talking about what might be some of the opportunities for working together. So that is enough for me from an introduction. And first up, I'd like to hand over to Alana Mann from Food Lab in Sydney, which I'm very looking forward to hearing about.
Hi, Kirsten, and hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. And thanks to Rania and team for organising such a fantastic program. It's been a great morning already. So it was terrific to go to the breakout room and have a little chat about some of the realities. It really comes to the heart of Food Lab Sydney, because we were talking about infrastructure and the importance of, once you've got a great idea that supports the principles of the commons, how do you make it sustainable? And before that conversation, I thought there are probably three things that I want to just mention, because I've only got 3 minutes, in relation to Food Lab Sydney, which is a food business incubator that's based on the Food Lab Detroit model. I'd like to say the first thing is humility. And I think David, you know, just so powerfully demonstrated how important that is when we're working in this ecosystem, because what we found with Food Lab Sydney, which is an Australian Research Council funded project, which has the generous support of the City of Sydney and also TAFE New South Wales, what we found is that we were entering an ecosystem that so many people were already working in and were already devoting so much time and energy to. So our role, coming from an anchor institution, I'm a researcher at University of Sydney with this, you know, aspiration of being able to somehow contribute to a transformation of the food system. We really quickly realised, okay, we are best positioned to connect people and to help build the capacity of the organisations that are already doing a great job in addressing not just food insecurity, which tends to be that deficit thinking that David again was talking about. Let's flip that. A lot of the organisations that are supporting Food Lab and our participants, they're actually focused on an assets-based approach. And that recognises that the energy and the skills and the knowledge is already in the community. And Food Lab Sydney, as a Food Lab business incubator, really is the sum of its parts. It's all about peer-to-peer learning. We've got a great team at University of Sydney who are actually operating the day-to-day program. Jamie and Katrina, I think, I hope, are on the Zoom now. And you know, just the energy we get from the participants, who are all diverse from different backgrounds throughout the community. And what we are doing is really not so much supporting them or giving them anything. We are just making them visible and actually accessing and giving them agency, which has actually been taken away from people, certainly in the food system. And this is where food is kind of a good lens for talking about the commons. And you know, I want to thank everybody for enabling us to have a platform to talk about food. And I'll also be talking about the role of the university as an anchor institution in this sort of food enterprise later. So I'm going to stop now and I'm going to pass over to Chris to talk about Black Duck Foods.
Yeah, Warramie and Ngani, everybody from Gadigal country in Sydney. Sorry to do this from the car, but I'm on the HSC English exam pickup. It's probably important just to give you a bit of background about Black Duck Foods. We're an Indigenous social enterprise committed to food growing processes and caring for country, and importantly, returning the economic benefits directly to Indigenous peoples. Some might know our founder, Bruce Pascoe. He wrote a book a couple of years ago. Part of, I guess, our intent is a promise that we've made. Those promises sort of fall into about 6 categories. One is to research what the elders did. Another one is to understand how elders manage country. That's really especially important at the moment, given that country has changed so much. How they sustain and grow foods is really important, and how do they benefit that country. It's about actively encouraging Indigenous peoples to be employed and learn around this knowledge, to inspire a broader conversation in Australia around traditional agriculture and traditional foods, and to basically try stuff so everybody's not out there trying to do it from scratch. And whilst an activity that's gone on for thousands and thousands of years, it's only recent history that we've actually learnt the truth around our traditional agricultural systems. So it's really important. But the premise for this, and I guess the premise for what we do, is that we only take this work because we receive our cultural license to operate from the Yuin people. So it's our relationship with the Yuin community that allows us to operate. It's there. Without their support, we wouldn't be in business. So without this relationship, we'd have no story, no knowledge, no enterprise. And that's part of this relationship. It's about understanding whose country you're operating on and paying due respect to those peoples in terms of how you do operate. So part of the challenge, I guess, for a lot of people is how do we go back and fix the issue that Tarania mentioned early on, which is the 1%. So Indigenous Australians participate in the economic benefits from traditional foods less than 1%. So that's 99% that's been stolen. And if we're talking about the notions of the commons, I think there's a challenge for everybody to understand and maybe reimagine, how do you operate on the commons on stolen land? So for us, it's about our way we collaborate and network amongst different mobs, how we share that knowledge and how we do something ourselves. But it's important that we operate with a cultural license and others start thinking about how they consider their operations with a cultural license, whether it's research, whether it's food production, whether it's looking to forge collaborations rather than have Indigenous First Nations businesses come in and sit in the colonial framework. How do you create a safe space to enter and be invited into the Indigenous framework? So it is a different change. It's a different way of thinking, and it's a different way of thinking about relationships, and it's a different way of thinking about who resides with the power of that relationship. You know, I am as a Ballander, an invader, and it's not for me to start telling First Nations mob how to operate. It's for us to be invited in and have them dictate how they want us to operate on their country. Hopefully that gives you some insights, and look forward to sharing some more in the comments, I guess.
Thank you very much, Chris. There's some really challenging questions there that I think a lot of us are wrestling with. It's a long journey. I'm going to hand over to Robert Pekin from Food Connect.
Thanks, Kirsten, and thanks, Tarania. Thanks to everyone at the Food Lab in Sydney. It's a really great opportunity to maybe share some of our learnings, and also some of the discomfort we've got to sit in as a white fella. Following on from Chris, a lot of that stuff that he was mentioning is deeply personal to us here at the Food Connect Shed. So just want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Turrbal and Yagara country, unceded lands in the so-called Brisbane. Our vision, just to share a bit of our vision, we sort of see ourselves being a part of a associative network. I've got an echo.
No worries. Yeah.
Oh, is there someone else talking? That's all it is. I thought it was me coming back through the mic. We sort of see ourselves as a part of a broader network across Australia in creating 200 plus food sheds, food hubs, right across the eastern part of Australia. The 4 ways we work is we decouple from fossil fuels, we divorce ourselves from market forces, we value custodianship over ownership, and relationships before transactions is critical to how we operate as a business, as a social enterprise. So basically, a lot of the stuff that we do is around emancipation, giving agency to people, and autonomy, but within community. So a lot of our work is, as Nate was mentioning before, is a lot of our work is unlearning, decolonizing our mind, and reconciling. How do we reconcile? Me as a 4th generation dairy farmer from Western Victoria, and farmers are probably the most, what's the word? There's a lot of work we've got to do with farmers in this space of helping them through the uncomfortableness of realizing that they are a big part of the problem, but they can also be a massive part of the solution. And that's why food systems work is so terribly important. It is the biggest impactor on pretty much all the wicked problems in the world as we see it at the moment. So it's an amazing opportunity. To tell you a bit about Food Connect, we're a multi-farmer, multi-eater social enterprise. We're focused on doing things. So I'm not much of a writer, or I'm not very intelligent. I don't really articulate things really well. I'm much more around just getting things happening in a very imperfect way. I'm not really interested in waiting for the right time to do something. Rather, I just get in there and do it. And one of the challenges with that, as Tarania asked me, what are the challenges with that? As a really progressive and quite utopian organisation, the biggest challenge for us is how do we bring people along on a journey? How do we communicate that in an effective way where you're not banging someone across the head? And probably in the early days, I did belt across, people across the head with my view of the world. Whereas now it's a lot more around allowing people to step into where they can see their power and where they can see where they can have an impact and build a food system out of where they're from rather than from where Food Connect is from. So we work with about 200 farmers, about 4,000 eaters, both wholesale and retail. We've got 550 careholders or investors that have bought this amazing building that we're in at the moment. And inside of that is around about 27, nearly 30 actually, nearly 30 tenants or tenants in common, because quite a few of the tenants who are in the shed as tenants are also part owners in the building. So that was that journey for us was much about custodianship than it was about ownership. Private property is it's actually impossible economically. And as we're seeing and I don't have time to go into that, but it's an impossible thing to own land in a true economy. So having 520 people collaboratively being custodians of this building has given us enormous opportunity around land tenure and building bridges with First Nations people. And we've got in our constitution, we've got one of the articles in the constitution is around acknowledging the epistemology of First Nations people of this land. And we've got some really great stuff happening with Mary Graham, Professor Mary Graham, and Dr. Lilla Watson. So yeah, a lot of our work is around imperfect networks sitting within imperfect networks to see what we can do. I'm not much into collaboration, even though the word, and people might disagree with me that we're amazing, at collaboration. I really see ourselves as really an association of organisations. To give agency, sometimes when you collaborate with someone or other in a collective way, there's sort of like an expectation that we all have to be quite similar, whereas I'm much more into, I just want to share my dream and help you unfold your true potential in the world in a way that benefits. And together as a loosely tied network, we have autonomy, but we also have collective power. And Brisbane, of all the places during COVID, really responded amazingly. Those networks of farmers, those networks of restaurants, cafes, and particularly buyers clubs. Buyers clubs were enormously, you could say the word preventative, but enormously popular through the COVID experience. So I think that's about all I have to say. Yeah, that'll do for me for now, Kirsten. Thanks so much, and hope that was of use.
Thanks, Robert. That was great. I've heard you talk a lot, and there were lots of new things in there. I enjoyed that a lot. Thanks, Robert. Some really lovely reflections and articulations of things, as always. Okay, now it's my turn. I'm going to talk a little bit about Food Connect, not Food Connect. I'm going to talk about Open Food Network. One of the things when Open Food Network first started, I sat down and had a 9-hour conversation with Robert Pekin that involved quite a lot of bottles of wine. And one of the things that he said to me that has stuck with us is about in relationships and partnership building that you need to check for values alignment. And if you have deep values alignment, you'll be able to work through, all sorts of other obstacles and challenges that you have, which has been a really strong guide for us, which has come true. So at Open Food Network, we power fair and transparent food supply networks that reconnect communities and regenerate the earth. We are working with farmers and food enterprises now all around the world to exchange produce through local food supply networks. These networks can take many forms of community food enterprise. They range from farmers selling their own produce at the farm gate and people picking up, to farmers working together on distribution to take to a network of drop-off points in the city, food co-ops and buyers groups, as Robert alluded to, farmers, ethical wholesalers, farmers markets. They come in all sorts of shapes and forms. My background is in research and policy, so I guess I used to write a lot. I try to write less and do more now. But it was very clear that the distribution system is a major bottleneck. It's, owned by multinational companies in a whole lot of ways, and really was sitting on top of this amazing grassroots movement to take back control of our food. And that there was very clear to us that there were opportunities in how we can use technology to unlock these local food networks and to make it easier for people to develop them and to replicate them and to learn from each other and apply different models, similar models in different places, etc. So when we set out to do this, there were 4 guiding principles. We wanted them to be networked. so that farmers can easily work with a range of different supply chain partners. We wanted to encourage diversity and local context. Local people know what local people need. And so it's not about having a cookie cutter, this is how you do a food hub. It's about supporting that diversity. Building in transparency into people being able to see where their food is coming from, how it's produced, and how much people are getting paid along the supply chain. And we also have a very strong commitment to openness. Open source has been a critical part of everything that we've done. So we, through COVID-19, basically we started off by developing a marketplace platform. The Open Food Network enables these farmers and food enterprises to work together and to sell and to move food. Unsurprisingly, as COVID has happened, it's experienced quite significant growth. There's a lot of farmers suddenly looking to move food into more local or supply chains that they have control over. Similarly, a lot of communities looking at how to solve their food security issues and how to bring food into their communities. So this has ranged for us from large farms pivoting to new farmers markets, adapting to having online sales in their farmers markets, as well as ones who are closed down, having pop-ups in communities that, you know, people are ordering from farmers and driving through truck stops to pick up their food, as well as working with a lot of groups in urban areas. So for example, the Fawkner Commons in Melbourne is a group in Fawkner, which is a quite disadvantaged multinational, multicultural community in the north of Melbourne that was one of the first to get shut down in the second wave. So a whole lot of people suddenly unable to get to food, and this community popped up in a bowls club and started bringing in food from local farmers using Open Food networks of volunteers to get food out to people. They've done a lot of interesting things since then, including lots of people starting to work with how this food as a commons idea stretches into the right to food, and how people are doing pay it forward kind of processes. There's lots of creativity in how people are making sure that communities are contributing to feeding people in their communities, not expecting that there's some big answer coming from someone else, and to take that responsibility themselves. So at the height of COVID, we had about 14 times the amount of food moving through the platform in Australia as it was 2 weeks earlier, which was quite stressful. But we managed to not go down, which was great. And now we've stabilized at about 8 or 9 times as much as was happening before COVID, which is pretty exciting, because what this points to is that this has been a bit of a catalyst for a lot of people who've been thinking about starting food hubs or exploring more diverse food supply networks, or exploring running a community bulk buying group, or, you know, packaging free co-op or something like that. Lots of these people have just jumped onto it and made it happen because they had to. One of the critical things about Open Food Network is that from the beginning, we do everything in and for the commons. We firmly believe that we can't build a new food system on top of architecture and tools that are controlled by other forms of capital. So the example that Michelle gave us about the Park Slope Co-op, we owned our building. We believe it's as strong in relation to technology. We need to own our data, our technology, our operating systems, and our knowledge for the common good. These are things that are needed by people all over the planet, and it's not okay to lock them down and restrict access to our understanding about how to make these models work. So a big part of why we started off building this platform, what we have now is this very vibrant global community of people working in these kinds of initiatives at all sorts of scales all over the world, sharing knowledge about what's working and what's not working, and how it's working, and how we can make the software support it better, etc. So everything that we do is open source and non-profit, available for use and adaptation to local context and needs. I think I just mentioned we're now in 19 countries. So we work together. When I say we're now in 19 countries, that means that people in 19 countries have found us, got organised, got themselves set up with a working instance that farmers and food hubs in their country can use. They've set up some sort of organisation. They're all independent organisations, and we've developed, you know, forms of non-hierarchical governance and management where we're all working together in a network. No one's in charge. And I guess some of the other things that people have mentioned about, you know, how important is relationships to this? Well, relationships is pretty much everything. Like, you know, the only way that this has happened is by being able to set a radical vision and start doing it and attract other people who share that radical vision and are willing to throw themselves into it. And so the deep, deep trust and values alignment that then carries us through, you know, any issues, challenges, running out of money, which happens, you know, relatively frequently. You know, we talk a lot about the idea of having a root system. You know, a lot of the people doing platforms, marketplaces in food systems, as Bronwyn has written about beautifully, attract millions of dollars in venture capital to set up their platforms and make them all sparkly. We've never had that. We've never been able to attract that. But what we do have is a really deep root system. A lot gets done with a very little bit of money. And when the money gets short or runs out, it doesn't all completely grind to a halt because there's a lot of people making it happen. And at the same time, we are, as we've increased our presence and I guess demonstrated what we're doing, we are starting to find it easier to attract resources, which is great. So yeah, I kind of think of it's a little bit like a hare and a turtle from a technology perspective. There's no doubt that a lot of other ways of doing things might have developed something snazzier faster, but we're extremely excited about where we're up to and the collective knowledge and wisdom and commitment that has got us this far, and very excited about the plans of where we go to next. Just very quickly, it's not just the platform. Around that, we do a lot of work supporting community food enterprises, developing resources, doing research. Through COVID, we ran weekly shared learning webinars for people to basically just exchange information about how they were adapting to restrictions and were they wearing masks or not and what kind of packaging they were using, which was this ability to just rapidly bring together people across Australia and the world to be exchanging information about, you know, what is this thing? We brought in colleagues from the farmers market in Beijing who, you know, took us through what they'd been doing and how they'd dealt with it. So these, you know, these deep and broad networks around the world of values aligned people working together to get things done. I think I can hear sort of binging bells, and as the facilitator, I should not push past that. So now I'll stop myself and pass over to Melina Morrison.
Thank you. Thanks, Kirsten. And thank you, Tarania, and everyone who's been involved in organising this amazing event. I'm late to the party today because I had another clash with a board meeting, but it seems an amazing conversation so far. I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I wish to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Look, I think in 5 minutes, I'm just wondering where to begin and place comments sort of meaningfully, because so much of what I want to say is echoing the fellow panelists, and I really feel honoured to be on this panel. So I guess I'll just tell you a little bit about the BCCM, the Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals first, and then I've just got a couple of reflections on the nature of cooperation in relation to what's happening now with the pandemic and also with food systems. I think that's probably the best contribution I can make. So, well, what are we? We are the peak body for the cooperative and mutual movement in Australia. We're a mutual ourselves, which means our members co-owners, and there's democratic member ownership, one member, one vote. We exist to do two things really, which is to advocate and raise awareness of the business model of cooperatives and mutuals, and also to do capacity building, which really means you know, we exist to make it easier to or you know, more enabled environment for setting up a cooperative or running a cooperative if that's what you choose to do. So in relation to food systems, one of our activities at the moment is an 18-month program, $2 million Commonwealth funded program, which has just been amazing and brilliant, called Cooperative Farming, which is to help primary producers, farmers, fishers and foresters across the country to set up and run successful cooperatives. And the government's investing in the cooperative sector
to create legacy resources which should be there for people should they choose to explore the business model of a cooperative, and it should be affordable, it should be accessible, and this is what we're doing with that money. So if you are a primary producer and you're interested, please visit coopfarming.coop to find out more. So so just reflecting on the nature of collaboration and cooperation. Well, look, I think for me, cooperatives are really, they're predicated on this idea that it's really important for us right now, as it has historically, to democratise the economy. And you do that, you can do that through shared ownership and through bottom-up development, which has been spoken about so much today. And if I can use a sort of farm analogy, a metaphor that was once given to me. If you think about this as manure, if you pile it up, you get a heaping pile of shit. But if you spread it as widely as possible, you have fertilizer. And capital can be fertilizer, and shared ownership of enterprises can be fertilizer, and all of the things you were talking about, Kirsten, about, you know, bottom-up, slow development is fertilizer for people. And I think that's what we mean when we're talking about social enterprise. So I've just been reflecting on why is it so important to think about cooperative behaviour, as well as, you know, I advocate for the cooperative model, but there's a legal model, but there's the behaviour of cooperation. And we're really thinking about this at the Business Council of Co-ops at the moment, because with the pandemic, it's really coming down to a few basic elements. In a crisis, things like food security are really important. Shorter supply chains are really important. Being closer to the local community is really important. When you've got lockdowns, border closures, tricky export markets overseas. For example, what's happened with abattoirs, and sorry for vegetarians and vegans on the call, but if we think about abattoirs in Australia, we've got a small number of very large internationally owned meat processing chains. And when they go down, as they have during COVID, it massively disrupts the supply chain. And that can, you know, existentially, that can imperil people's security. Cooperation is it's better for human beings to cooperate. And right now in the pandemic, we're seeing this amplified in the language being used by people, communities, health workers, government administrators. We're trying to grapple with how we collectively tackle something which has the capacity to harm us individually. And the institutions of the political response to COVID in Australia, such as the National Cabinet, are really predicated on this idea of cooperative activity, collaborative activity. And that's the same around the world as well. I mean, negotiating things like border closures requires cooperation. Global institutions like the World Health Organization and the WEF and the United Nations are predicated on the idea that you have to collaborate. And that's really important, because it's rational self-interest to cooperate and to collaborate with each other, which in all of the expressions on this particular panel and early in the day, I'm sure, they're all variations on this idea that it is actually in our self-interest to cooperate. And understanding that our personal well-being is better off by cooperating with others is going to be really fundamental transitioning of the economy to be more inclusive, I believe, and the work that everyone is doing is so vital. So it's not just as we've heard with the different models, and Robert was talking about, you know, Food Connect, a wonderful, you know, hybrid model. Cooperation can also be a business model. The cooperative business model is enshrined in legislation, and it has 7 cooperative principles that are enshrined in legislation, and it commits the members to jointly and democratically control their enterprise together. So what does this mean, just finally, in terms of food and agriculture? I really wanted to think about this. I really believe we're better off when food systems are predicated on cooperation. Food cooperatives, they're really a rebuke against corporatisation of agriculture and food. Co-ops and different types of food network, they allow the smallest of enterprises to retain their integrity as independent businesses, but they can scale collectively through the platforms such as what you're talking about through the food network, Kirsten. You can gain a share of the supply chain or a larger market. If we just look at co-ops in Australia, there are more than 20,000 farmers who are small business owners who collectively farm through cooperatives. So they own the supply chains. That means they cut out the middle guy and they get a better return to the farm gates. And why is that better for consumers? Because they challenge monopolies. We've got a lot of duopoly markets in Australia, and supermarkets are one of those. And when multinationals interact with smaller players, they squeeze them. But if smaller players can come together and collectively bargain, then they have more power and can get more purchase. So, you know, it might be great. It's not great for consumers to get $1, you know, milk for a while, because in the end, that just forces farmers and producers out of the market because they can't produce sustainably. So for really legacy, healthy food systems, we need different business models, and we really need producers and consumers to be able to collaborate in different ways.
Yeah, sorry,
one of those being co-ops.
We're going to have to move on, sorry.
Yeah, that's really all I wanted to say is, you know, just a shout out to collaboration in food systems, because it's going to be vital for our food security and sustainability. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Melina. It was great. Now we hand over to Murat Keskin from UBI in Sydney.
Thanks, Kirsten. Thanks for having me. And I want to start off with really extending my appreciation for all the work Robert has done. And because a lot of the work we do today and a big part of our community has actually been built on the backbone of what Robert has achieved in his 14 years in running Food Connect, as we have taken over Food Connect in 2014 here in Sydney, their operations, and have taken on their community in order to join ours. So thank you there, and thank you everyone. I think everyone here worked relentlessly to get to where they are. I think there's a lot of personal sacrifices in here which we don't talk about. I think there's a lot of work and sweat that's gone into the things we do. And I think we all should be really proud of ourselves, because where we have gotten hasn't been easy. We have been looking into, you know, we're running social enterprises, and in everything we do, we talk about capital, because capital is actually the biggest issue we're having in getting us to where we are. So the question always turns out to be, how do you get the next amount of capital in order to do what you want to do? And, you know, we're looking for philanthropic ways. We trying to secure government funding. And look, for me personally, for UBI, the current situation, we have started off as a social enterprise, and I won't lie, it was rough. It's been really rough keeping the business alive throughout the years. I'm very proud of what we have achieved with the crew, with the people we have on board. I actually didn't say what we're all about, but we really like something like we are what Food Connect is. I don't think we're doing as great as a job as they are doing. I think they have built a great community and connection with farmers, which is inspiring, and which you know, I take them certainly as a role model. And at the same time, we are doing what the Open Food Network is doing, but we're trying to do it in a way that we you know, make this business viable and gain the capital in order to create those systems and create a marketplace that is shared, that is a platform that is cooperatively owned, and where all of us can connect into and create that connection again between each other, because that's what is really lost. Consumers are disconnected from farmers. Farmers are incredibly disconnected from consumers and demand. They are bound to these market forces that are extremely heavy on one's life of substance and not fair, and it is about breaking them off. And I think there's a lot of new legislations that have come out recently, and I think Robert has, and Food Connect, the Food Connect chat, Food Connect Foundation has give us a real good example of how powerful community can be if you involve them, when they have done their equity crowdfunding and raised $2.1 million. And I think it is really important to note that we are living in a world where you have individuals basically being able to add $13 billion of net worth to their wealth. And they utilize this in order to automate the world further and further. And when we have started back in the day, things were going slowly, but they're going more rapidly and they're going faster. And these evolvements do not include community and do not include people. And I think given how fast paced it's going and how much wealth is in those few hands, it is really important that we bring people together and make them realize how much power we actually have by including them in our businesses and making them owners of what actually generates money, and look at it in a way where I believe we need to generate money in the system we're in, because we all need to survive. It is not just about farmers. It is not just about community. Everything in this world currently is struggling, and we can incorporate the community to the point and build a governance structure where small enterprises get together and share knowledge. We have a lot to learn from each other and generate that money and free up that money in order to create more good in the world. I think we have a real opportunity with new legislations that are out. And honestly, seriously, like, we do things. I do not do this for me individually. I want to be in an environment that is shared, where we look after each other, that is fair, where we find out what actually fair is, because what is fair sometimes to me is not fair to you. And we can only find that out through communication, because I think the issue to what we're facing in the world is a philosophical issue that goes deep within us, and a lot of conversations are to be had. This is just really exciting. I'm just going to stop here. It's really exciting to be all around you and have so much knowledge in one place. And thank you for doing all your inspiring work. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Murat. It's great to have a panel of so many motivated and inspired and inspiring people. We don't have any time for conversation now, unfortunately. If people have ideas, things that have occurred to them while the panelists have been talking around possible collaborations or partnerships or how people might work together, please just put them in the chat. And I think that the general invitation is that people who are here are open to being contacted. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tarania, if that was not the way to do that. Anyway, handing over to you.
I am on mute, or I'm not on mute. Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. People are absolutely open to be contacted. And look, I loved the ordering. I love that we ended on Murat, because Murat and I had a couple of conversations over the last couple of weeks where, you know, he said just what he said, which was, look, I'm ready for, you know, community ownership of this organization. My community's building, it's transparent. But I'm also very much about collaboration and cooperation across organizations, which is what you've all been talking about. He wanted to go last. We looked at the ordering. He wanted to go last. He's Sydney based. He's up for it. We'll certainly be having more conversations. Alana is already part of the Sydney Commons Lab. So we've already got 2 people in Sydney who are really up for these future conversations, and actually there are others. So it's not just these 2, but in terms of this panel, and of course, you know, everyone else on the panel, Kirsten, Robert, Melina and Chris. So I feel very excited by what I've just heard and the way it's ended with that opening for Let's Work Together in Sydney. I mean, Melina's also in Sydney. The community wealth building framework is very much about cooperatives as well as small organisations working together, like different types of organisations, but it's very much about community owned as well as collaboration across different forms. So very excited by this. Okay, we do need to move on, but thank you everyone. Okay, so the next bit, we're moving into the anchor institutions, the large organisations, and how they can support small and local, or yeah. So we're going to start though actually with the research that's been conducted by Mel Edwards and Susie Pratt from UTS on urban commons ecosystem valuing social, relational and aesthetic dimensions. Over to you both. You there?
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, I just need to unplug my headphones. Susie, are you here as well?
Yes. Do you want to kick off now?
Great. Okay. Thanks so much. So Susie and I, through our roles at UTS, have been involved in and also looking at as sort of observers what's happening with the Sydney Commons Lab and leading up into the event today particularly. Part of the research was inspired by a conversation that I had in the early days with Terania, and it's been an ongoing one, that often the work that's done in the kind of relationships that we've all been discussing throughout today and the networking and the connections that are created are often undervalued in the way that we think about the commons. And so we really want to help work collaboratively with everybody to try to map out and make more visible what are the dimensions of value creation that actually occur through the relationship building piece itself. So we really want to look at the sort of glue that binds us all together, but the intermediaries and how they connect with one another as well in enabling commons to be. The other sort of angle that we're really hoping to explore a little bit more in this work is the notion of the new commons, which some of you might be familiar with. But often we think of commons very much in the tangible sense, in the sort of materials and the natural resources and how we think about our ownership and interaction and relationship to those material objects. There's also something very fundamental in the social relationships, and that's very fundamental to the sort of networking piece. So, you know, how can we actually think about what we're doing today in this social interaction as a form of social urban commons? And this is quite an interesting paradox, because often, I've heard it a lot even in my breakout group, for those people I was in the room with, not trying to dob you in, but everyone says, I don't know how to be involved in this, or how do I get involved in this, or what is this thing? And I think part of what we want to do through the research is show that we are all the thing. And it is participating in the thing, whatever the thing might be, that makes it what it is. So it's really capturing that process of emergence as it's occurring and making that a visible part of the way that we value the interactions that are happening here, not just the outcome. The event today is the outcome. It's fantastic and it's wonderful to see everybody's beautiful faces, but this is not the end. So Susie, I'll just throw over to you if there's a little piece there you wanted to add about how we're doing the research, and I can put a link as well to the survey as you speak.
Fabulous. Yeah, just adding from Mel Edwards, as Mel mentioned, I'm also at UTS, and just fabulous to be involved in this event and have Democracy Collaborative here as well, to learn from them and others who are all doing pioneering work in the space around anchor institutions, and love the conversations that have come up today around thinking how we can, like from a university perspectives, can leverage resources and play a role with local communities, and that really place-based dimension that's been coming across all of the conversations from today. And as Mel mentioned, through the research, finding out more about how people are participating in the commons, the outcomes of that participation, and how exchanges of information and knowledge are occurring amongst different participants. Everything that's been coming up today in many ways, and also the alternative forms of valuing the work and different aspects that emerge, thinking around and measuring, well, the impact of that and how we create different forms of valuing that. And I had some really interesting interesting conversations also in the breakout where some of those elements came out. So what we'd also love as part of this event and working with Tarania and others from the Sydney Commons Lab is to learn more from all of you who are interested in participating around a survey that we've got that's part of this event, but also part of the broader research. Do you want me to pop that link in the chat, Mel? And do you want to add anything further to that survey?
Sure. I think it will also be sent out afterwards, after the event.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do it now, it's also part of the evaluation, because as we have to acknowledge, the Sydney Commons Lab has been supported by the City of Sydney, and we're also going to report back to the City of Sydney, and so completing this survey is also helpful for helping us understand the impact of the event itself.
Thank you so much. And yeah, once again, I want to thank both of you. And I do want to say also, Mel's been on the journey of the Commons since it began. And she was actually the first person in the group that said, why don't we start a Sydney Commons Lab? I do want to acknowledge that when David Poynton, Mike Dowson and I were organising in collaboration events with Mel. So there you go. So is Monica here? Monica Baroni? Have we still got Monica? Oh, no? I wonder if we've lost Monica. No. Well, did she come on at all?
I can't see her in the call.
Oh, okay. Maybe she's got tied up. Maybe she wasn't able. So Monica Baroni is the CEO of City of Sydney. So she's not here, but I do want to say she's, you know, she's been really supportive about this and really keen to be on this call. She was just kind of fitting it in, and maybe we're just a little bit too late for her, I'm not sure. But she was certainly going to be talking about how we could work together, and her kind of interest also is how the social, the community and the economy can work together rather than seeing them as two separate issues. Before I move on, I wondered if Bronwyn, because we both had a really long chat with Monica, if you want to say anything to that, Bronwyn.
Yes, well, just depending on whether Monica might suddenly turn up, but it was an exciting conversation that we had about sort of the ways in which they're interested in taking forward Jess Scully's community decision, which was unanimously supported by the rest of the councillors and the mayor, to build community wealth building into the policy framework of the city. And as Tarania said, and actually what genuinely surprised me in the conversation initially was her interest in bridging the economy and community. You know, the city actually distributes its money along quite different channels, like community grants here, economic development and business grants there. But there's a real appetite from the top in the city to look at bridging that. And the work that they've done with David Beaumont and the engagement around First Nations issues, I think she also spoke about that very directly and saw that as an important and primary example of the centrality of relationships to bridging that community and economy. So that I don't, you know, to what extent she would have endorsed that in speaking to us, I'm not sure, but that's definitely what we heard from our conversation, and that there's now going to be a sort of a formal process of issuing a discussion paper from the City of Sydney to sort of gather input from outside the city's environs as to what it would mean at the practical level to build that into policy. So that's all part of, you know, how that can respond as an anchor institution. And again, rather like Jess Scully's sort of, we want to spend our money on projects like yours. That was, you know, how can we see you better? How can we recognize your conceptions of value and so on?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bronwyn. Okay, now we're moving into one of the projects that we did at Sydney Commons Lab was collaborate with the Faculty of Transdisciplinary Innovation at UTS. And that actually was Mel Edwards suggested Susie and I meet up, because Mel and I had been, you know, Mel was part of the lab, but also we had that strong relationship around relationships. Susie and I met up, and then that led to a whole project with 230 students and a number of you speakers actually speaking to these students on equitable and sustainable food systems. And that actually led to Susie joining the lab, and Sky Hugman from Western Sydney University, and Annie Liu, who's a student here today who did our logo. So again, this is how relationships connections work. And then from the conversations, four of you from the different universities, Western Sydney, Sydney Uni, University of New South Wales, and UTS are talking about doing a hackathon. So anyway, I'll let you now speak to that. Thank you.
So I'm just going to introduce this briefly, and the hackathon is a possible, we'll get to that at the end. We really wanted to frame it in terms of conveying what we've done to date, and then just allude to this idea at the end. But what, the context of this is universities as anchor institutions. So just to sort of go, actually Nate didn't focus so much on that, but they're a very important part of the vision of how community wealth building works in a practical sense, because they are place-based and they command a lot of resources compared to smaller projects, and they have no possibility or motivation to move from that place. So utilizing those resources and getting universities and local governments to work together, for example, to respond to place and support local initiatives is very much part of the vision of anchor institutions. But we've done a couple of things as a set of pathways towards that, which we're each going to describe for 1 minute. So I've already used my minute, and I'm going to pass on to our first experiment. You'll hear a bit more about now.
Thanks so much, Bronwyn. So as Tarania already mentioned, I was connected via Mel to work with Sydney Commons Lab because I teach in the Faculty of Transdisciplinary Innovation, particularly on a degree called the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation. And the subject I was exploring was around, it's called Past, Present and Future of Innovation, which is really around how we create, capture and deliver value, and worked with Sydney Commons Lab to set the challenge around food systems in order to think about how we might shift from more extractive notions of valuing to much more regenerative forms of valuing, with 250 students, including some that are in this event today, which is fabulous to see. So part of that was kind of thinking around, in some ways, for some of you familiar with the different hackathon formats where you provide a challenge and then different teams of people prototype different responses to that challenge, running through different approaches of doing that. And as has been emphasized all throughout today, the emphasis on relationships, and it was so valuable to have Tarania and the introductions she made, some of you who are also part of this event, to come in as a panel of provocation, speaking to different students around on the ground impacts of the challenge around food systems, which the students then responded to. And fabulous to have earlier today, Jess Scully talking about, well, how do we do this collective learning and mutual learning and connecting with students to have those different multi-layered approaches to that. And through that, really I've started to understand and think about much more role in the university as an anchor institution, as Bronwyn was talking about, to really, I suppose, do that bridging work in relation to how do we reallocate resources or different ways of engaging place-based locally with some of these core challenges. And just also wanting to highlight, I suppose, in the chat, something that's come up a lot today, which I think is so important going forward as a public institution as well, to really think about, I think David, Kirsten, Rob all mentioned it, and I'll quote Kirsten here, sorry, that food systems cannot be addressed without going to the core wounds of dispossession and oppression. And really, I think that's the provocation I'm taking forward as well in relation to this event today. Over to you, Sky.
Great, thanks, Susie. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge all the work that Tarania has actually put into this, and everybody else in the Commons Lab. There's been hours and hours of wonderful work, and I think that what this program shows me is that the capacity for us to all ask questions, and the questions that are kind of being raised here today are kind of helping us kind of move forward. one of the things I came to the Commons Lab through Susie, and then I met with Tarania. And one of the things that we've started to formulate is the kind of experiment or an exercise, I think, in how you do institutional cooperation. Also as part of the practice of commoning. And as part of that, how do we address the reproduction of power? Like, universities are incredibly powerful. They're economically powerful, they're socially powerful, they're, knowledge dominantly powerful. And they're somewhat competitive as well. And they can silo. And so what we've kind of started to do is think about how can 4 different universities across Sydney come together and think about commoning or collective reflexivity, or if we think about, I suppose, anchor institutions as part of an inclusive, sustainable economy built on locally rooted and broadly held custodianship, it kind of made me think, well, what is the role of the institution or the university for young people? What is the role of young people as being the participatory citizens, I suppose, of a university? And how could we engender or engage young people and their voices to, think about the response to the issues that are going to be really important to their future and affect them. And so, I do a lot of work with young people and resilience and research, but I think what I really wanted to kind of convey today is this has been making me ask questions about, if universities are networked and they're networked institutions with powerful assets and, knowledge assets, what kinds of questions do we need to ask of that power, especially for collective bottom-up approaches to, a better world? What's the role of cross-university collaborations and in pedagogy development, and building and encouraging commons practices with young people? Another thing I kept thinking about was, how do we build trust between academics, as well as part of a commons-based principle approach? And also, how can we enable, or help universities to build narratives around the value of cross-university collective reflection? So I think one of the things that I'd like to end on is, how do we think about collective reflexivity with young people across different universities, especially when these universities are place-based and we have really very different cohorts across these 4 different universities with very different social, economic, racial, and knowledge epistemologies. And I'll pass it over to Alana.
Can I just say, Monica is on the call, so Alana, please do speak. And Monica, can you stay just a little while, and can everyone please stay, because we'd all love to have closing words from Monica.
Okay, well, this is a segue from Food Lab to City of Sydney, which is quite appropriate, I think. It also talks to learning because as the University of Sydney also takes up quite a large portion of Gadigal land and should be a good neighbour. And I think that's my main message about what Food Lab is trying to achieve, because I think that unlike Food Lab Detroit, and this has been, our most interesting journey as a real experiment, Food Lab Detroit started in a bankrupt city, and it was driven by a grassroots social movement of largely African American women. And Food Lab Sydney is actually being governed by an anchor institution. So our main challenge is actually to listen and to disrupt that hierarchy of learning that is so much part of our institution. And in working together with other universities, I think that we're doing that in terms of the Commons Lab vision, opening up our universities to the broader community, recognising the knowledge embedded in lived experience in our communities is the only way that we are all going to solve some of the common problems we're facing. Otherwise, we're just complicit and we're just reinforcing the same hierarchies that have got us into this problem in the first place. So I think while universities are an essential part of a theory of change, they're absolutely useless if they remain in their little ivory towers. And so it's great to see so many people who are actually letting us into their space, I think.
We'd like to have some other closing words. And Annie, are you still here? Annie? Have we lost you? Oh, okay.
Yes,
Oh, yeah. So I'd like some closing words from you as one of the students and the student who chose to join the lab, join us at the lab after your course with UTS Faculty of Transdisciplinary Innovation. So could we have a few words from you? What you'd like to say, how you found this event, and what made you want to progress with the Commons?
I think first of all, I was just really newly introduced to this concept this year in the BCII course that Susie has led. And it's really opened my eyes in seeing how through systems thinking, through collaboration, through the shifting of values, how we can connect really great work and how hopeful we are for the future. And I think that's something really important for students to see, and to see that there's actually initiatives that's it went beyond an assignment for us in this course, and it kind of just being introduced into this conversation and seeing everyone, the over 100 people who joined in on this event, and how there's actually actionable steps that's being taken to transforming our society and shifting our values to becoming more local in this increasingly still globalized world with a lot of international speakers. And I think that I'm just very looking forward to see all the different initiatives that's going to continue from this event. And I think that's what this what Sydney Common Lab is so valuable for, is just connecting each and single one of us, because I would say just a few months ago I am completely unaware of this community and its existence, but right now I think I'm very hopeful and very excited to be a part of the future to come. Thank you so much for this event.
Thank you, Annie.
So look, I'll just say a few words and hopefully there'll be a minute or so left if there's any questions. Firstly, I really want to say how grateful I am to have been invited, and congratulations on this very significant initiative and the excellent program that you've put together today. I only wish that I could have spent the whole morning with you. I'd also like to acknowledge our wonderful City of Sydney Deputy Lord Mayor Councillor Jess Scully and thank her for introducing us to the concept of community wealth building and initiating the discussion that we're now having in the City of Sydney organisation, and of course with important stakeholders and partners like you. At the City of Sydney, we're now working on a community wealth building discussion paper, and I just heard that mentioned. And of course, we will be sharing it with you and seeking your suggestions, your input and support. The discussion paper will guide the development of a community wealth building policy, and this policy will act as a lens through which the City of Sydney will conduct itself in the future. It will redefine the way we conceptualise our role and investment in economic development. It will prioritise the relationships we form via partnerships and grants. It will provide criteria for our substantial procurement power and the ways we seek to influence the procurement of our partners. And it will consider the way we use the many assets we are the custodians of on behalf of our community. These are, we understand, some of the pillars of community wealth building, and we'll be considering these in our discussion paper. In the short time I have, however, I would like to spend a few minutes on the rationale underlying the City of Sydney's interest in community wealth building, as it's important to explicitly understand the why of this new policy lens and policy. And because this is what we have to get right, and we must develop this in consultation with you and our community, the very people that we're very privileged to serve. So when I think about community wealth building, I think that it represents a maturing of and a creating of a stronger nexus between many things, but two of the things that have guided our work and investment at the City of Sydney since the commencement of this current administration. That is social capital and economic development. Our commitment and significant investment in building social capital is driven by an underlying conviction: the greater the number of strong community organisations, the greater the capacity of the community to understand and defend democracy and good governance. That is the condition and skills required for community wealth building. In addition, the City of Sydney understands that the greater the number of strong community organisations, the greater the resilience of the community and the economy. For example, during this pandemic, the City of Sydney, through its long-standing relationships and by providing grants, was able to very quickly form the alliances needed to deliver essential services such as food relief. The trust we had in each other and the proven governance arrangements and capability enabled us to quickly ensure that money and resources were transferred with little probity risk to the organisations best equipped to provide the service. Our commitment and significant investment in economic development is driven by an underlying conviction that the way the economy functions is a matter for society and should not be left to the market. That is, if we are serious about fairness and the importance of closing the gap between rich and poor, then we have to overtly intervene in the way the economy works. I think a community wealth building policy advances these things and will provide the criteria for council's action and investment in the future. We have always included values-based and public benefit criteria in what we do, but I think a community wealth building policy will strengthen these and provide a clearer evidence base to these criteria. For example, in our planning, we should not just be interested in the number of jobs created, but in the quality of those jobs. We should be as concerned about the security of a person's employment as we are about them having a job at all. We should be prioritising investment in economic activity that commits to research, development and product production that occurs in our own country and city. And we should be overtly supporting the introduction of more co-ops. These are some of the sorts of things that the community wealth policy will outline, which will then be converted into the ways the City of Sydney conducts itself, partners with others and procures. Finally, our policy must outline the advocacy required to change the laws and rules that do not support community wealth building. And of course, it must determine how we will measure if our goals are being realised. I really look forward to going on this journey with many of you in this conference today. Thank you and congratulations on this important event.
Thank you so much, Monica. Those are great words. They're music to, I think, all of our ears. And wonderful to have you here. Thank you for making the time and for the time when Bronwyn and I were able to chat with you as well. We really appreciate that. Okay, so just, David, I would love to have some closing words from you. David Beaumont, yes.
Yeah, there's two Davids, isn't there?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, look, I now after I think what's it been, a couple of hours, isn't it? Yeah, more than that. I just want to channel an elder that I work with a lot, and a lot of the successes and the approach that we've used at the city. From me come sitting with this elder who is actually based up on the Central Coast, but his traditional lands are up in around Central Queensland, Kalkadoon, I think. And I will mention him, Uncle Phil Bly. And I do a lot of different things with him on a lot of different levels. But the most important thing is about a respectful relationship with him as an elder. And I bestow that with humility to him because of the wisdom and the way that he's able to present beautiful analogies or philosophies. And so the one I wanted to share with you in the context of this, because I know that Sydney Commons has got a bit of a food theme to it. So one of the things that he said to me, and look, some of you may know, I actually do earth ovens too. And in this space, I want to share this with you. And it's that food, it fills the gap in our bellies, but it also fills the gap between us. And to me, I think, Tarania, when you talk about, what's inspired me with you guys, I'm a glass half full guy, and I've found my circuit breaker to be able to channel that energy into that space. And I see a lot of positivity and energy, and I see the way you guys have accepted and invited us. And that's my commitment is I'll do my best to edify this process with elders in our community and present a value proposition to them if they want to become involved in this. But the other thing I'll just say I can't remember, apologies, with the cooperative. Some of the things, as I said before, it's not what you see in here, it's what you don't see in here. And what worries me is when, number one, there's a tokenistic gesture for First Nations people to, you know, be invited into the conversation, yet not have an embedded seat in that conversation. And also the opportunities of sustainable economic revenue stream. You know, I don't want to be pessimistic and negative here, but the reality is that, you know, we've been dispossessed of our ancestral homelands. So the reality is that it's probably 0.000000001% of people in that cooperative, and I'm not singling you out, who actually are, you know, productive contributors via, you know, this concept of what we call farming. Well, as Chris said, with Uncle Bruce Pascoe, and I've had the privilege to work with Uncle Bruce on many different things, is, you know, we have proven beyond reasonable doubt that we have, through harmony, subsistence, synchronicity, systemic change, we have contributed to the agricultural majesty of these lands, and it's been completely degenerated and, you know, imposed on with antiquated European systems, and we all know what that is. So the thing in that is that, just on this point, the last point is to make sure that when we are going on these cooperatives, that First Nations people are included in there, and that there is opportunities for their knowledge and their wisdom and their ideology to be not dismissed and appropriated. But you know, land councils are asset rich, but they're cash poor. So there's all these different opportunities that I just wanted to introduce to you. And on this journey, I'll be happy to continue to be on the journey and do my best to invite First Nations into what you're co-creating. So the last point, Monica's probably heard this from me, is the city is, if we want to coexist, then we need to co-create, right? And that co-creation means that what you've done, Tarania, is by cultivating a space for First Nations people to feel included viscerally, not tokenistically, is the opportunity and the challenge in your long-term vision. So thank you again for allowing us to be part of this.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So, yeah, there's so much to say about that, so I'm just going to say thank you. We're over time, and there's still a number of you on the call. So I just want to say, look, we are, as I said earlier, we're on this journey. We're on this journey for the long term. At the same time, we're also pacing ourselves. But having said that, pacing ourselves, because we have to look after ourselves. So much of this is labour of love. We have to, you know, look after each other. At the same time, please do be in touch with me if you want to follow up on anything. We'll also be emailing you following this event as we kind of gather together and look at what our next steps are. I've already said we're going to be looking at food systems. We're definitely committed to building relationships with First Nations people and including them, not just, you know, tokenistically, and looking at how we progress learning and co-learning, sharing our learning around how we do this community wealth building and commons. I'm aware you'd probably be leaving very unsatisfied, going, oh, there's so much I still don't know. I just got, you know, a bit of a taste. And in some ways, we gave priority to seeing the ecosystem, to getting a feel of just who is in this ecosystem for this 3 hours, as opposed to the content. So we will happily, when we email you, we'll happily send some extra links. There've been links in the chat, but there'll be extra links we'll send on commons and community wealth building in case you haven't got them. But also please feel free to be in touch with me. We do meet regularly, so if you'd like to join our meetings, please get in touch, though we're also just pacing how we do that, once again, because of our own capacity to service a network. But as I said, we're experimenting in collaboration. It's not just about a network. And I love the way Robert described, you know, associating. We're working individually and collectively and looking at how do we do collaboration so it's meaningful and purposeful for each of us. Yeah, so some of us are going to stay on. If anyone wants to just keep chatting and has a few questions, we're available to chat a bit more. But aside of that, thank you, everyone. Absolutely. It's been an amazing time with all of you. Thank you for your patience, because I know it would have been a lot of information overload, but hopefully you had this strong feeling as well of just what's possible and a feeling about the people, all of you here. Just, yeah. Does anyone who I've not, was there anything I need to do? Sorry, this is what we do in the Commons Lab. Did I miss anything from anyone in the Commons Lab? Did I miss anything? No, is it all good? Okay.
That was great. Thank you, Tirania, and everyone of the organizing team, Dan and others. Excellent work.
That's it. That's what I missed. Thank you. Absolutely. The organizing team. I mean, Dan, Sky, Nicole, Pete, from Impact Story Lab, just Bronwyn, Susie, just literally everyone. Can you just wave? Actually, that's probably the easiest. Can you just wave, all you Commons Lab people who are still on the screen? Great. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. You will get to know more of us more. Maybe Dan, you want to say some closing words as well?
I'm just so grateful. I'm just looking through all the faces that that have kept popping up in the meetings week in, week out, and I'm just stoked that we kind of kept to time, sort of like we're 10 minutes over.
It's not bad, is it?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, so look, so I'm going to close the meeting. Those of you need to go, but otherwise we're on for questions. I don't know how we do questions and answers. Maybe somebody else wants to guide that. Go on, Dan. Feels like you'd be happy to facilitate that.
I kid you not, I got to get back out in the field.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I'm here. All right.
Putting food in.
Does anybody on the floor want to speak or ask a question? Maybe that's the way to do it. Do it in the chat, or anybody want to actually say anything? Feel free. We're very human here.
I want to say that noise was the dogs barking because my Ubi box arrived.
Oh, Ubi! So exciting. You're smiling. Anyone else want to say anything? It's just like, just say hello.
Oh.
Cassandra, you sent me that message. Did we not meet at a wedding?
Hi, Tirania. We did.
It was a wedding in Western Australia. Sorry, everyone.
It took me straight back. Yeah, we did. I couldn't quite place exactly where I met you. I knew it was in WA though.
Yeah. It wasn't work. It wasn't ACOS. It was a wedding.
No,
okay, cool. Anybody else want to say anything? Anyone want to ask a question or say anything?
Just wanted to thank you, Tirania, and your organising team and the people on the call. It's been a really engaging conversation, and really quite remarkable that you've handled such a large group of people so well facilitated.
Thank you. And you know what the key is, you know what I'm going to say, and I know you will know, Melina, because you talk it as well. It's relationships. It's relationships. On the phone to people saying, do you mind? It's only going to be, do you mind if I interrupt you? Will that be okay? Will you still speak to me afterwards if it doesn't work? So there you go. Anyone else want to say anything?
What's been really powerful about this space is just feeling feeling safe to bring your whole self. It's not putting on this facade of we're all the professional business people, and it's actually being relational and sending text messages and calling when you need an answer to something. It's so it's been lovely to be a part of that. But I will have to shoot off. So thank you everyone for a beautiful session. I'm going to go put some food in the ground.
Thank you. Well, while people are still on the call, and Paul, it was nice to see you, Paul Atkin, because we several people have mentioned you to me and your work around co-op. Is it not co-ops, but anyway, are you still there? If I lost you. Oh, do you want to say hello? Do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Look, thanks so much. It was a really fun session, and it was great to hear what everyone's doing. I'm excited to connect with a few of the people on the call. Mike, I was just trying to work out how to direct chat you, but I can't in the line. So I would really like to reconnect with you. And Melina, thanks very much for your call, talk. Look, thanks to everyone. It was great. Much appreciated.
Great. Okay. Jules Livingstone, you don't feel like saying anything? I know you've got your screen off, so you may not want to. Okay, fair enough. Anyways, hello, because you're still on the call. Tyler, I don't know you, but I'll say hello. Do you want to say hello?
Hello. No, I just want to thank everyone here for creating the space, and it's been such a wonderful experience. We actually have met before, Tarania, at the Lumio Decentralized Organizational Principles event 2 years ago.
In Wellington?
No, the one in Sydney.
Was that at UNSW? I think it.
No, it was at some random place near King's Cross. I thought I met you there. But I know how you know David that's how I know David Poynton, who now, anyway.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that one. Oh, yes, now I remember.
It's just great
with
to see
Richard. Yeah, Richard Bartlett. Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Nice to say hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you to all the speakers, and it's been amazing. So big thank you.
Oh, beautiful. What about Susan? Do you feel like saying hello? I know you've got your. I don't want to force you.
Hello. Hello.
Because I've got a feeling, were you Roselle Neighbourhood Centre? Was that you?
I was at Roselle Neighbourhood Centre until about 2 weeks ago, yes.
Yep, okay. So
I was involved in, a lot of my work there was with rescued food services. I got funding to establish a community food garden. That's completely taken over by community members, I'm happy to report.
Fantastic. Okay, we'd love to chat with you more. You probably know Phil Petit as well, because I think I noticed you'd written that you're
I do
involved
know
with
Phil,
the
yes.
Food Coalition. Great.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice to say hello. What about Turkin? Do you feel like saying hello? No pressure. But
hi everybody. Great session today. Thank you so much.
Oh, lovely to have you here. I've just noticed we like each other's posts occasionally, so lovely to have you here.
Absolutely.
What about Sarah? Do you want to say hello? No need to turn your video on, but do you want to say hello? Sarah O'Brien?
Hi. Hey. I don't have much to say, but I also work at Ubi with Murat. So.
Oh, okay, fantastic. And then there's Maria and Richard. Oh my God, I could say my favorite. Well, I can't say my favorite because everyone I love. But oh my God, you're here. It's so awesome. Maria, say hello. Say hello to everyone. Maria and Richard, the most amazing people if you don't already know them. Decades of amazing work. Just say hello, Maria and Richard. You're on mute. You've got to take your mute off.
Here. There we go. Oh, great work, Tarania. Thank you.
So many wonderful colleagues, and
Yes.
it's great to see the work of 60 years and more is still continuing all over the world and learning from each other and facing the tiger of the domination and control mechanism and building the new. Thank you.
Oh my God. I'm so inspired by you over so many years and your support of my work and so many others. You two are inspirational completely. These are actually the founders of the Sydney Facilitators Network, by the way, which now goes on its own, runs once a month on a Monday, and founders of so many other initiatives and supporters of so many others, and doing climate action in Western Sydney, and also very active in Sydney Alliance.
Reconciliation. Yes.
Woo, and reconciliation, running bridges, building bridges. Absolutely. Murat, do you want to say anything on what it's like for you to be here?
Yeah, special mention here. Oh, I turn this off.
Murat, no?
Sorry, you're talking to me, right? You said Murat. Okay.
Because I really appreciate what you're saying at the end, and I think we're going to keep talking about food and food systems.
Oh, look, I really love this. This is just the beginning of a conversation that hopefully will go much deeper. And it's just exciting to know that people are excited to wanting to create change. I don't think either of us exactly know how that is going to happen. And we all have our visions, we all have our goals. And a lot of conversations need to be had in order to really understand each other philosophically, understand that our goals are probably the same. I mean, it's all about social justice and creating a fairer environment for us all, where people are looked after each other. And those are the conversations that will be fruiting with this. So it's just exciting to be part of this. So thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic. So I reckon, unless anyone wants to say something specific, let's just go around and like a final sentence to close this. How about we do that? Would that be all right? Can I, I'll get David to close last. So I'm going to go from Jules. If you are listening, you might just have your computer on. Can you say a final sentence? No, he's probably not listening. Susan.
Final sentence. This is my first Sydney Commons Lab event that I've attended, and I wish I'd known about you earlier.
Okay, thank you. Turkin?
Just to come across such passionate people that have set some really amazing, strong seeds into our heads right now. I just want it to be watered and these connections to be made real.
Oh, beautiful. Peter? Pete, can you speak? No, he can't speak. He's doing work. Sky?
Sorry, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who's cared and put care into this. And thank you very much to David Beaumont for sharing your, wisdom. Thank you.
Great, okay. Tyler?
Yeah, just kind of paraphrasing off what Rob Pekin said before.
Pekin, yeah.
Pekin? How do we hang together in entangled networks and empower each other to reach our respective purposes, activating the greatest version of ourselves and the planet?
Beautiful. Chris? Maybe Chris has disappeared for the minute. Sarah? Nice to see you. Sarah? You're on mute.
Yeah. Hey, sorry, just want to say thank you so much for this. It was one of the most positive conversations I've heard about the future, especially for people who really know what they're dealing with. There's a lot of obstacles, but yeah, it's just really inspiring to see the positivity and hopefulness, and I'm really excited. And yeah, thank you.
Okay. Marie and Richard? Are you on mute? You're on mute. Okay.
Okay. It's wonderful to be with people who learn to love the earth in every step that we do, and also how we feel about each other and what we think. Everything matters, and this is where we are going, creating together the new.
Great. Okay. Murat?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Creating together the new. I think that's what we can all agree on. We're all in this together. We're all facing challenges, every single one of us. And we will get together out of this. It is not about giving power back to the people. Power has never been taken from the people. It has always been in our hands. And I think the faster we realize this and make others realize it and empower others and show others how to lead, like we share our knowledge and yeah, grow our communities and getting together. So thank you. This is really great. First talk, 116 people. I'm pretty impressed. Thank you for all the work you've done in getting us together. I know it is not easy because all of us are really busy in their heads and in their own survival. So it's been nice to be taken out of that and
Right.
put into this.
Sky, did you already say something? Yes, you did. You moved in my screen. Chris, you didn't say anything because you came on screen and then you went off. No.
Chris
No,
can say
okay.
something. Chris has a lot to say. He talks.
Yeah.
He,
No,
Chris,
he's not saying.
No.
No. Okay. We
he's
saw his
probably,
face.
there he is.
Here he is. Yeah. Final words. We're at final words.
He's probably just delivered Bronwyn's box. Did you deliver Bronwyn's box?
No, he's having trouble. That's really hearing, I think. So we'll just see Chris. So David, you have final words. Yeah, David Beaumont.
Okay, so at the front end, Tarania, you mentioned that I make up a whole lot of sayings, which I do, and those who know me. So I want to just I'm going to read just something from this quickly, but before I do that, I'm going to share with you another one of those insights. And you know, we all have our needs and our wants. Some just want more than they need, right? And I think that's what this is aspiring to do. Is to tap into people's, you know, conscience, I think, to really, you know, that other saying that someone can't do everything, but everyone can do something. And so how do we inspire those to take a bit more responsibility for them measuring out their needs and their wants, right? This is from this book. You can see it's called Immortal Words. For those who, when I was invited in with you in the early stages of Sydney Commons, I've read it before, so please bear with me. It's just two small, short paragraphs. Over the last 4.5 millennia, humankind has been inspired to humility, compassion, fortitude, bravery, and above all, progress by the spoken and written word. The absolute power of language across nations to make us feel courage, compassion, sadness, all the emotions is probably the greatest achievement of humanity. For humankind, language is our greatest, perhaps our only weapon against injustice, inequity, and war. So I want to leave that with you. Another thing that this is promised, the last one for me, a call to compel me to continue action and not dwell in barriers that are put up, is people shut down when you tell them what you're going to do. They open up when you show them what you've done. So I think best of luck with Sydney Commons. Tarania will stay connected with you on how we can be a part of that. And when I say me, as a First Nations man born here on Gadigal land, and introducing, as I said earlier, to First Nations people. But also we've got a City of Sydney relationship. So again, thank you for allowing us to, in practice, bookend this, and I appreciate that with humility. And just on this last one, as I've said before, when you go forward and you do it with humility and contrition, in the context of First Nations people, those are two very powerful things. And it saddens me that when I see people's strategic directions or reconciliation action plans, I rarely see those two words, humility and contrition. So that brings it back to ask yourselves what you're doing, why you're doing it, who you're doing it for, and how you're going to do it, and when you're going to do it. The law of probability tells me not everyone in this room was here when you were compiling Sydney Commons. The law of averages tells me that not everyone will be in the same room in a year, let alone 5 years. But you know what, folks? The law of association puts us all in this room together. And that's the thing that ought to compel us all to make equity and justice for all. I was at a speech with Uncle Bruce Pascoe, and someone got up with the best intentions, and she said, how do we protect Aboriginal culture? You protect the people, right? See what I mean? So let's be very careful about being seduced and blindsided by intention. We really need to understand those really core thingos, and that human element within us all will help us guide through that haze, amazing guys. So thank you very much. You're on mute.
I have this wonderful person otherwise. Okay, thank you everyone. Just absolutely lovely. I'm so glad you all stayed on the call. It's actually really nice to end this way with something more personal and hearing everyone's voice. And we'll be in touch. Phil, do you need my email? I said I'd put it on the thing, but I didn't. I'm not very good at this stuff, really. Can someone put my email there, please? Thank you. Great. Okay. All righty. This is what it takes, a team, right? Okay. See you all. See you soon. Bye. Hilarious.